Chapter 2:16. The four Ironbacks had been Elmar's subordinates for many years, and this time they were also brought to the fortress, but they had not shown up in the previous battles, and they suddenly rushed up the wall at the last moment and played a decisive role. After the battle, Elmar returned to her human form, but her beautiful face had lost all color. She was badly injured, and she was so tired that she was about to cramp. Raphael, who was in the underground hall, was of course unharmed, but his face was also pale, and he could hardly stand up. As for the magicians, they were no longer able to fight. This day's battle did not only happen in this fortress, otherwise, no matter how capable Raphael and Elmar were, they would not be able to stop the all-out attack of the Giant Legion. Just like yesterday, the Cold Legion went out of the city to form up again, and the assembled troops slowly advanced in the direction of the battlefield. Felix decided to remain vigilant, but for the time being, he decided to focus on taking down the fortress first. The speed of the retreating Legion was very slow. They even stopped for lunch at noon and continued to advance in the afternoon. Felix saw that the fortress was about to be taken, and of course, he refused to give up. He knew that he had enough troops to fight on two fronts, so he ordered his subordinates to form up to meet the enemy when the Cold Legion had marched 10 miles away, and to ignore them if they did not reach this distance. He did not expect the Cold Legion to be serious this time. When the siege battle was at its most tragic, Felix gathered 1,000 sword and shield soldiers and cavalry to form up on the avenue to meet the enemy. At this moment, it was another fortress that suddenly launched a counterattack. Link opened the gate and rushed towards the Giant Legion's battle formation with 200 cavalry. In his direction, Felix also placed 500 sword and shield soldiers on guard, and immediately formed up to meet the enemy. The cavalry's impact was strong, but it did not completely defeat the battle formation formed by the giant warriors with their heavy shields and long edges. Link also brought 10 magicians out of the city, and with the cavalry, they cast magic attacks. Felix was not moved by Link's attack. He believed that the 500 giant sword and shield soldiers could stop the 200 cavalry, and gave the order to fight to the death. Link went out of the city because the situation in the other fortress was critical. He also saw that the enemy's catapults could not be transferred to attack his fortress, and the most feared archers were all not in the battle formation, so he sent the cavalry out of the city to fight. Link himself was also a great magician, and with the help of 10 magicians in his team, he killed hundreds of giant warriors as soon as he left the city, and he also lost dozens of cavalry. But the enemy did not retreat, and the formation was tight. The cavalry could not continue to exert their impact. Link hurriedly ordered the cavalry to return to the city. The cavalry, who had no battlefield experience, was inevitably a little confused when they retreated. The giant warriors took the opportunity to attack and rushed into the gate of the fortress. Just then, there was a sudden buzzing sound. Link, who had already rushed back into the city, immediately activated the defensive formation and launched a counterattack. The city guards also rushed towards the city gates. The city gate was closed, and the giant warriors who had rushed into the city gate were all killed or captured alive after a fierce battle. The priests of the Giant Legion were attacking Raphael's fortress under the command of Lucien. The archers and catapults were also in that direction, so they could not attack Link's fortress for the time being. The giant warriors outside the city had to retreat and continue to guard. This battle was also thrilling. When the four Ironbacks finally joined the battle, George led the Salem Legion and saw from afar the giant army that Felix had set up. On the chariot, John whispered, "Did you see their formation? There are very few cavalrymen, almost all of them are sword and shield soldiers." George muttered, "The giant warriors are very powerful. Be careful of the spears they throw when you charge within 100 steps." John sighed and said, "No matter what, we still have to face them head-on in the end. This is the best opportunity. They have no catapults, no archers, and even no chariots, so we can take our time to get into formation." George nodded slightly and said, "They have few horses to begin with, and there are many places on the Saya Plateau where horses cannot pass, so they have to rely on the strong Highlander giants to carry the horses over. With few horses, there won't be too many chariots, and even fewer cavalrymen, so we have to make good use of them." Their chariots are all set up on high platforms and let the archers attack the fortress. Felix is too confident. Does he want to use sword and shield infantry to resist the charge of our chariots? John narrowed his eyes and said, he has the capital to be confident. The spear and shield phalanx formed by the giant warriors is very difficult to deal with. Besides, he has now transferred all the archers to attack the fortress, and they should be tired after shooting arrows for a day. It's all thanks to Raphael and Elmar that we've exhausted their most threatening forces. George's original plan was to let the two fortresses hold on for more than 7 days, consuming and restraining the combat power of the giant legion, so that they would not be able to storm Leng in the short term, and turn the decisive battle into a war of attrition. Unexpectedly, the plan was not as fast as the changes. He did not expect Felix to use his troops so fiercely, targeting one fortress and launching continuous fierce attacks, while Raphael and Elmar defended the fortress so tenaciously that they had achieved the expected goal ahead of time. If the giant legion were allowed to rest for a few more days to replenish their combat supplies and continue to attack like this, the fortress would definitely not be able to hold. George and John had already prepared for both sides, and seeing this situation, they took advantage of the situation to march forward, and the decisive battle came ahead of time. When the armies of both sides set up in the sunset, the siege battle was finally over. After fighting for a day without taking down the fortress, the crossbows and firestones were exhausted, and the chariots and catapults were also restrained, but another decisive battle was about to begin. At this time, the people who were suffering the most were probably the priests of the giant legion. They had formed a magic formation to assist in the siege and had been fighting fiercely for a day, but now they had to return to the magic formation. It was impossible for the two armies to fight without the help of the priests. When the battle formation was set up, Felix was already flustered and exasperated. The head-on battle between the two armies that he longed for had arrived when he least expected it. He waved his giant sword and was about to curse when he suddenly heard the rumbling of hooves, and the chariots of the Leng Legion suddenly charged forward. John was slow when he marched, but when he got close, he would fight as soon as he said he would, without a single word of nonsense. The war drums sounded, and George flew into the air. In the center of the Salong formation were 12 priests holding staffs. They were the 12 judges. George had sent all the mages to the two fortresses, and the 12 judges were the last priests that could be used in Leng, and they could not only cast magic but also attack in close combat. Each chariot was pulled by 2 horses, and on each chariot was a driver, a sharpshooter with a shield and a sword, and a crossbowman. They rushed to the front of the formation and fired arrows, and on both sides of the chariot formation were armored cavalry to assist in the attack. After the rain of arrows, the giants also threw their spears, and the neighing of horses and screams of pain continued. A general, surrounded by his guards, jumped off the chariot and rushed straight to Felix's position, and the spears shot at him were all swept away by the gust of wind. This man was really a fool, and in the blink of an eye, he had already killed his way into Felix's guards, and the guards of both sides immediately fought. Felix shouted and jumped up with his sword in hand. "Who are you?" The general shouted, "John." Then a dazzling white light burst, and the huge energy shock caused the surrounding warriors to fall to the ground. John was already fighting with Felix, and the chariots behind also crashed into the spear and shield formation of the giant warriors, and the battle unfolded in full swing under the dusk. The chief priest of the giant legion, Lucian, secretly complained. The charge launched by the other side's general named John was so powerful that he jumped off the chariot halfway and charged into the formation on foot, dragging the commander Felix into the melee, and the others could not get close at all. The battle had just begun, and the head of the legion himself was no longer able to command the formation, so the responsibility of commanding the battle fell to him, the chief priest, which was unexpected. The Salong Legion seemed to have seen the weakness of the giant legion's misconfiguration, and launched a charge with chariots, while the armored cavalry protected the two sides of the chariots, which was the most feared tactic of the spear and shield formation. Fortunately, the giant warriors were strong, and the giant shields in their hands were amazingly heavy, so they were able to resist for a while. But the timing of the outbreak of the battle was a bit wrong. It was almost dark, and after a long time, it was bound to fall into a melee with unclear vision, which was very disadvantageous for the infantry in formation, as it was difficult to ensure that the front and rear of the formation could advance and retreat in an orderly manner. Thinking of this, Lucian ordered a countercharge to eliminate the other side's priests at all costs. Because he found that the other side had a supreme mage commanding the whole army, but the number of priests was very small, and only 12 followed the chariots forward in formation. Their position was too close, and the other side's commander seemed to have made a mistake. He should not have placed the priests so close to the front line. There was a vacuum in the middle of the battlefield, which was the place where John and Felix were fighting fiercely, and the two generals' personal guards were also repeatedly charging around. Under Lucian's command, the priests worked together to apply various protections to the most elite giant warriors, bypassing this battle, and desperately counterattacked the center of the chariot formation. After this round of fierce assault, the giant warriors threw spears at the 12 judges, and the spears whistled like raindrops. The spears they threw from dozens of paces away could even pierce a wall. However, something surprising happened. The priests actually swung their iron rods, and with a thunderous sound, it was as if a large net of swords had formed, sweeping away the incoming spears, and then they actually rushed over. Sandstorms and flames appeared in front of the 12 judges, and the dust on the ground rolled up and hit the giant warriors' shields with loud bangs, making the giant warriors unable to hold their shields steadily. George waved his staff down in the air, and countless white lights shot down like arrows, defeating the countercharge launched by the giant legion. Lucian was dumbfounded. What kind of priests are they? They are actually charging on the front line. The battle between the two armies did not last long, but Lucian had been waiting bitterly, fearing that something would happen to the commander-in-chief Felix. Once the center of the battle formation was broken, the morale of the entire army would be greatly weakened. Felix was very annoyed. He did not expect that the other side would have a supreme warrior who could penetrate his personal guards and directly fight with him, and this person knew magic. A powerful energy impact burst out with the sword rays, and lightning shot out in all directions, entangling him tightly. Most of the Highland giants were born with divine power, but everything had its pros and cons. Most of them were simple-minded and had well-developed limbs. Although they were much stronger than warriors of the same level, it was very difficult for them to train to a higher level. The warriors of the giant legion were all Highland giants, the elites of the Assyrian kingdom, but there were only 2 supreme warriors. The front commander, Jufei, had been injured during the siege, which allowed John to succeed in his surprise attack on the commander-in-chief. The priests of the giant legion were not Highland giants. Most of the trained Highland giants were warriors, and mages were very rare. So Lucian's command of the army was a little uneasy. Felix wanted to finish the battle with John as soon as possible. He had an 8th level achievement and was stronger than the average 8th level supreme warrior, and his heavy sword carried the power of wind and thunder. Unexpectedly, Hardadef was able to withstand it. His entire body's joints emitted explosive sounds, bringing with it a wave of manic power. He did not retreat in the slightest. It was soon dark, and the casualties of the retreating legion's chariot charge were not small, leaving the wreckage of chariots and horses all over the wilderness, but they broke through the 2 layers of defense of the giant legion and repelled a counterattack. Lucian pushed the battle formation at the back to the front, and all the soldiers let out hoarse shouts. Arrows were constantly flying, swords and spears were clashing, and the sound of chariots colliding with giant shields was endless. A loud shout came, and a powerful energy surged out from the center of the battle formation, and 2 figures shot out in a somersault. Felix finally unleashed his most powerful slash, and the giant's sword with an arc of light collided with John's sword. The 2 swords were forcibly chipped, and the impact sent both of them flying backward, and the commander finally escaped from the melee. Seeing this scene, Lucian hurriedly gave the order to blow the horn, and the last row of guns and shields left a gap to advance forward. The tired soldiers in front of him fought and retreated like the tide. He wanted to stabilize his position and end this chaotic battle before nightfall. At the same time, the horns sounded from the retreating legion, and the chariots no longer charged, and the battle ended with the fall of nightfall. The result of the battle was a draw. Although the retreating legion had the upper hand in terms of tactical arrangements, the giant legion was still evenly matched with their powerful combat power. Both sides suffered more than 300 casualties, and coupled with the casualties and consumption from storming the fortress, the giant legion was no longer able to attack in one go, and had to retreat to rest. George was also unable to take advantage of the situation to launch a counterattack against the city of Enril, but he pushed the battle line between the two fortresses and reinforced the fortress that had been defended for 3 days. Judging from the situation on the battlefield, it was hard to tell who would win, but this result was a victory for the city of Salem. Although the battle did not defeat the giant legion, it reversed the situation of the entire battle, forming a stalemate, holding the front line of defense and ensuring the stability of the rear. And after the baptism of this battle, the soldiers of the retreating legion also gained real confidence and became a force that could fight tough battles on the battlefield. The most tragic part of the battle was naturally the fortress guarded by Raphael, where more than half of the 500 defenders were killed, and the remaining half were all wounded. The section of the wall that the giant legion attacked was almost destroyed, and without the protection of the magic formation, a supreme warrior like John would have been able to collapse a large part of it with one kick. Defending the fortress and fighting in formation, the retreating legion suffered more than 900 casualties among the 3,000 soldiers of the retreating legion, a staggering number. George was also unable to counterattack for the time being, and the retreating legion was in urgent need of rest. But the people of the city received an unprecedented encouragement, because the legion they had formed had repelled the giant legion, and everyone regarded it as a great victory. In the minds of the people, this was also a victory for Ammonius, and everyone walked into the shrine at the same time to offer sacrifices to Murin and Ammonius on the high platform. Then the people heard Ammonius' oracle that the gods encouraged the people to have the confidence to build and defend their homes, and Salem was in an uproar. Ammon, far away in the Garden of Eden, learned about what happened in Salem through the statues in the shrine. The principles of the battle against Enril had long been established, and Ammon did not want to intervene in the battle, unless George made some mistakes in his command. George naturally did not make any mistakes, and Ammon was a veteran of the battlefield, and in his view, it was Felix who made a mistake. Felix should not have attacked the fortress so fiercely, and a smarter approach would have been to besiege it for a long time to strike and deplete the reinforcements of Salem, which the giant legion could have done. But Felix underestimated the defensive capabilities of the fortress, and blindly attacked, and in the end, he was in a difficult position. On the other hand, Felix had no choice. He wanted a quick victory to solve the supply problem of Enril in the plains of Duk, and was unwilling to confront Salem for a long time. But the battle with George resulted in such a result. Now that the armies of both cities were resting, no one was able to launch a decisive blow. In the subsequent battles, as long as the commanders did not make serious mistakes, neither side would be able to defeat the other, regardless of victory or defeat. Unless there was a turning point in the balance of power, the situation had already been formed, and the complete annihilation of the other side had become an impossible plan that outweighed the gains. Ammon did not have to pay too much attention to the battle. But Ammon had to pay attention to it. When the people prayed to his statue with one heart, it formed a strange power that awakened Ammon from the spiritual world, as if the statue standing on the altar had opened its eyes. Ammon finally understood one thing. Building a shrine to accept the sacrifices of the people so that the soul could absorb endless power was not without restrictions. When everyone focused their faith on summoning him, his soul would also be disturbed, and he would even have to watch it all. For the first time, Ammon was forced, by the faith of the believers, to open his eyes on the altar, and his training in the Garden of Eden was temporarily disturbed. He had absorbed this power, and it was only natural that he should pay the price of being coerced by this power at this time. In this case, Ammon simply took advantage of the situation and gave an oracle to encourage the people. The celebration in the city was just a small interlude, and then Ammon continued to train in the Garden of Eden. The war on the plains of Duk broke out as he expected, and several small-scale conflicts broke out, but neither side could achieve a decisive victory, and entered a state of stalemate and attrition. With this war, Ammon's vision and mentality of the world gradually gained a sense of detachment. He was really like a god that people could not see, but could feel. Chapter 217. There were countless pieces of debris falling from the sky. Aman stood there with his sword stuck in the ground. Gabriel knelt on one knee in front of him and raised the battle axe high above his head with both hands, saying, "Aman, you win." Aman took the battle axe and put it away in his spatial magic tool. He stood there and asked, "George, do you want to arbitrate?" George didn't see clearly how the two had decided the winner, but the scene in front of him had already explained the result. He hurriedly stood up and said, "There is no need to arbitrate, Lord Gabriel has already admitted defeat." Aman pulled out his sword and gently patted Gabriel's shoulder. He smiled and said, "Well, the duel is over. You can get up." Gabriel said, "You can kill me." Aman replied without batting an eyelid, "I can kill you or not. According to the agreement of the duel, it should be up to me to decide. You are now my prisoner, and I will ask the Empire of Igut to pay a ransom for you, a noble warrior. If the Empire of Igut refuses, you will become my slave, and I have the right to give you back your freedom." Gabriel nodded and said, "That's right, what do you plan to do?" Aman smiled and said, "This is the first time in my life that I have fought with someone in such a way. It's really enjoyable. I'm tired after fighting for so long. Let's have a good drink and eat. I will send a messenger to the pharaoh about the ransom. You can only wait for the result. Your mission is complete. I still want to have a good talk with George." George came up and said, "Two top warriors of the continent, the duel just now was really wonderful. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it clearly. Lord Gabriel, when did you become an 8th rank warrior? Even I didn't know." Gabriel stood up and replied, "Just now." George was taken aback. He stared blankly for a moment before exclaiming, "Advance in battle? I've never heard of such a situation." Aman smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "So what if you haven't heard of it? Haven't you seen it with your own eyes? I didn't expect that this duel would only last for a day. Let's continue drinking, we haven't finished talking yet." Everyone returned to the undamaged tent. It was time for dinner. Link cleaned up the broken utensils on the table. Aman took out all kinds of delicacies and invited everyone to sit down and talk. George and Link sat down, but Gabriel stood beside them. Link asked, "Why don't you sit down? Aren't you tired?" Gabriel replied with a serious expression, "My current status is Aman's prisoner of war. Aman is sitting at this table, so I should be standing. Thank you Aman for freeing me, and thank you for the food in front of me." The Supreme Warrior's temper was stubborn and he did everything very seriously. Aman had to say, "Then you can stand and eat. Drink a few more glasses of wine, I specially prepared it for the two lords." "George, the Supreme Warrior Gabriel has completed his mission, and you are also here to kill me. What do you want to do? Do you also want to ask me for a duel?" George shook his head and said, "I'm not a supreme mage like Celia. How can I fight a supreme general like you without a summoned beast? If I really want to fight, it should be the Supreme Warrior Gabriel in front, and I fight from behind. That is the best way to deal with you. The Egyptian Empire sent the two of us to kill you because they wanted us to do that. Aman, but you didn't. How do you want to complete the task?" George sat in a chair and stretched his arms, his expression seeming very relaxed. "I accepted the order, but there are two kinds of tasks in this world, those that can be completed and those that can't be completed. Before I set off, I said that if I couldn't complete the task, I would not go back. I have long known your ability, and your power is far greater than when you led thousands of troops. It seems that I have to practice hard, otherwise I won't be able to complete the task. Ammonius, for the sake of our old friend, can you let me stay here and practice?" Aman and George looked at each other, and then both laughed, the laughter getting louder and louder, almost to the point of tears. Aman raised the jug and poured a glass of wine for George. "You are no match for me, you can't complete the task. George, I can continue to practice and become stronger, maybe one day I can surpass you now." Aman blinked and said, "You may improve, but don't forget that I will continue to practice too." I was far inferior to you at the beginning, and now I have a 9th level achievement. George, then I'm afraid I'll have to stay here. Will you take care of my food, drink, and accommodation? Before Amon could answer, Link couldn't help but interject, Lord George, if you are willing to stay in Salem, we would be more than happy. I will arrange everything, you can rest assured and live comfortably, just let me know if you have any requests. George suddenly let out a long sigh and said, continuing to break through is easier said than done. There are many people in the world who have awakened their power, but almost half of them die as first-level mages, and some are even unable to break through to the 2nd level in their lives. There are so many warriors in the world, but how many of them can achieve a higher level? After Enkidu, I have not heard of anyone else who has a 9th level warrior, and now there is Amon. How difficult or lucky is it for a supreme mage to advance? I wonder if I can have that kind of luck. Amon smiled and comforted him, everything depends on one's own effort, just like a mission, there are those who can't and those who can. You were not born to be a supreme mage, were you? Lord George, there is also a shrine in Salem, and now a chief priest is needed to appease the people. If you stay in the city, you would be the most suitable candidate, I wonder if you would be willing. George glanced at Amon. You yourself are the most suitable, right? Amon shook his head and said, I'm not suitable, I'm already standing on the altar. George nodded. Well then, I can't live and eat for free, I have to do something. Before I complete the mission, I will be the chief high priest of Salem. It's a familiar job for me anyway, it's easy to do. Gabriel was surprised. Lord George, you want to be the chief high priest of Salem? But their shrine. George turned his head and interrupted her. Great warrior Gabriel, you still don't know where I came from, do you? I was born as a sorcerer, and as a sorcerer, I achieved the highest level. The person who taught me was called Nietzsche. He was born as a miner in Duk, and he was also a supreme sorcerer. Now that Duk has become the city of Salem, and I came here, it may be the luck that guided me to a higher realm. Amon, if you want me to be the chief priest of Salem, there are 2 things I want to make clear. Amon held his glass and said, Speak. George said unhurriedly, Since I am the chief priest of Salem, then don't use the title of mage, just call me a sorcerer, what do you think? In the city of Salem, not only the nobles, but everyone can receive guidance in learning magic, no, let's just call it magic. Amon and Link looked at each other and slapped the table. Of course we didn't ask, in fact, we are all born as sorcerers. But whether it's magic or magic, it can't be taught casually, it has a test requirement, and can only be guided to the right person, it has nothing to do with identity. George smiled and said, Of course I know this, I am the chief priest, these specific matters are handled by the priests, I will tell you what to do. I also want to remind you of one thing, my mission is still to hunt you down, and maybe one day I will do it. Amon also smiled and said, I'll wait. George waved his hand. You don't have to be too nervous, I will tell you before I do it. Anyway, the Order of the Empire of Iga did not specify the time, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, if I live long enough, maybe 100 years. Amon raised his glass and said, Then I wish you a long and healthy life. The 2 clinked their glasses and drank, and as soon as Gabriel saw this scene, he already knew that George did not intend to return to the Temple of Isis as a high priest. He chose to stay in Salem as the chief priest, on the one hand, because he did not want to carry out the mission of hunting down Amon, and on the other hand, he should have his own considerations. A supreme mage like him no longer pursued wealth, status, or even glory, but achievements in this life, and may have encountered a bottleneck that he could not break through in his training, and was looking for a new opportunity. Gabriel was pondering there when Amon suddenly turned around and handed over a cowhide envelope. Want to know what Maria said to me? It's about you, see for yourself. Gabriel took the envelope and took out the papyrus inside, only to see that it read, Gabriel had to accept the order of the Empire to hunt you down, I know her temper, she will only fight you, so that it does not violate her beliefs. She has lost her power now, just like you did back then, this is a test. I hope you can help and guide her through the test, but everything is up to her own choice, and I wish her and you well. Aman, I have always known what you are doing, and I understand your love and your pursuit. Gabriel held the papyrus for a long time and read the simple lines of words over and over again, his fingers trembling slightly. After a long time, he looked up and said, I didn't mention it to anyone, so the adoratress saw through it and knew that I had lost my power. No wonder she asked me to give this letter to you before the fight. Aman sighed. You never read this letter at all, although it has always been with you. How incredible it is for a warrior to hand a letter to his opponent before a duel, telling the opponent that he has lost his power. Maria may have been afraid that I would accidentally hurt you, so I asked you if you wanted to change the time and place, but you still insisted on the duel today. Gabriel replied, even if I did not lose my power, I knew that I was no match for you, and I knew the result when I asked for the duel. During the duel, I forgot what kind of power I used to have, and I just did what I could. No matter how strong you are, you will advance unconsciously during the battle. Aman asked with great interest, I have a personal question. For a 7th level supreme warrior like you, when you advance to the 8th level, do you usually lose your power? Gabriel replied, some do, some don't, the situation varies. It is said that this is a test of the gods for their people, giving some more difficulties. Aman, what's the difference between knowing and not knowing? Gabriel, in terms of the power mastered, there doesn't seem to be much difference, but there should be a difference, I'm not too sure about this. Aman turned to George and asked, when you advanced to the 8th level, did you also lose your power? George shook his head. No, it's just that for a while, I always felt that I did not have enough magic power to perform magic, so I lived in seclusion in the shrine until I had enough magic power to instantaneously cast supreme magic. As far as I know, 8th level supreme mages have different experiences and achievements. For example, Julian, the supreme mage who died in battle, did not lose his power at all when he advanced. There must be some kind of clear guidance that I don't understand yet. Aman thought for a moment and asked, 9th level supreme mages like Likueyu, Gilgamesh, and Goliath, did they also lose their power when they advanced from the 7th level to the 8th level? George shook his head. How would I know? No one will say it. Listening to you, you seem to understand the mystery behind it. Aman smiled and with a flick of his finger, the wine in the jug gushed out strangely and condensed into the shape of a mountain on the table, from which several paths appeared, each leading to different heights. He explained, like climbing a mountain, there are many paths that can reach the same height, some paths can go further, some paths may bypass certain obstacles but not reach the top of the mountain. There may only be one path or several paths that can eventually reach the top. George's eyes lit up, and he pointed to the hill of wine on the table and said, the same path, different people can climb different heights, some people can only stop at the foot of the mountain, others may reach the mountainside. Ammonius, if there is a chance, I would like to have a good talk with you in private. Link chuckled and said, Lord George, you finally called Ammonius by his name? It doesn't sound like a joke this time. If you want to stay in Salem as the chief priest, there will certainly be plenty of opportunities. After he finished speaking, he glanced at Gabriel again, and seeing that she was still holding Maria's letter and standing there in a daze, he asked Aman again, Ammonius, Lord Gabriel is now your prisoner of war, how much ransom are you going to ask the Empire of Iga to pay? Aman also glanced at Gabriel, and then replied lightly, I don't want ransom, I just want something from the Empire of Iga. George asked, what is it? The Supreme General must want something special, it's not someone, is it? This sentence was actually a joke, and the someone he was referring to was, of course, Maria. The Egyptian Empire could not agree to this condition, and Aman could not make such a request. With another flick of his finger, Aman put the wine on the table back into the flask, and said expressionlessly, if you want to ransom the supreme warrior Gabriel, my condition is the position of the chief god of the Empire of Anare. George's hand trembled, and he almost dropped the glass, and said in a trembling voice, my God, what kind of condition is that? Aman replied coldly, the reform of Merneptah Pharaoh's divine system, the establishment of Ra as the only heavenly god, and Seth as the head of the angels representing the heavenly gods, has nothing to do with me. But he sent Gabriel and you to kill me in the name of the oracle, so my request is to deprive the oracle of its name. This condition may be unimaginable, but for this matter, it is only natural for me to make such a request. As for whether I agree or not, that is a matter for the empire of Igut itself, and it has nothing to do with me. The hidden meaning of these words could only be understood by the gods. In the name of believing in an Ra as the only heavenly god, Seth occupied the position of the chief god of the Ennead, and guided Merneptah Pharaoh to carry out a religious reform, but sent down an oracle to let the empire of Igut send people to hunt down Aman and prevent his people from returning to the plains of Duk. Now Amon's condition was that if they wanted to ransom Aman, they would have to exchange it with the position of the chief god believed in by the empire of Igut. This was simply beyond the imagination of the world, and perhaps even the craziest madman would not be able to say such a thing. But calmly analyzing the causes and effects, the conditions proposed by Aman, while inconceivable, were not unreasonable. It was impossible for the empire of Igut to agree to such a condition in order to ransom a supreme warrior, and even saying it would be blasphemy, and Aman did not want them to agree, he just wanted them to propose it. George and Link recovered from their shock and looked quietly at Gabriel again, thinking to themselves that this supreme warrior would probably never be able to return. The shock on Gabriel's face was indescribable, as if he had heard the most impossible language in the world. Night had fallen, and there were no lights in the valley, and Gabriel stood in the darkness and finally spoke, Aman, you made such a condition to make it impossible for the empire of Igut to ransom me. So what do you plan to do with me, as your slave or free me? Aman asked in return, you don't have to ask these questions for now, I will make a decision when the empire of Igut officially rejects my request. Now I just want to ask you one question, it must seem crazy to others for me to make such a condition, but you know the process of this matter, does it make sense? Gabriel pondered for a long time and finally nodded. It makes sense, but it is also your own idea. Aman smiled. It is indeed just my own idea, and Merneptah can't stop me from thinking what I am thinking. If he is unhappy, then so be it, even if he flies into a rage in the palace. Gabriel, Maria entrusted you to give me a letter, didn't she give you an explanation? Gabriel, the adoratress also gave me a letter, and specifically told me to open it only after the fight. I haven't had time to read it yet, so I don't know what it says. Aman waved his hand. Then read it, if you don't want to say it, I won't ask. Gabriel took out another cowhide envelope from his arms, opened it, and pulled out a piece of straw paper. In the dim light of the night, he saw that it read, You have lost your power, I know that, and I have told Aman. I know your personality very well, and only by formally dueling with Aman according to aristocratic etiquette can you be freed from your mission. Even if you have lost your power, you will still make this request. Otherwise, you will not pass the test, and only when you make a choice will you receive true guidance. Now that you have seen this letter, perhaps you have passed the test and will face another choice. Aman will make a ransom request that the empire of Igut simply cannot accept, and you will become his prisoner of war, and after the empire of Igut formally rejects it, he will release you and return your freedom. At that time, what kind of guidance will you receive in your faith? I know your faith very well, and there is no need to deliberately change it. I also know your faith in the gods, which is the light in your heart. I hope that you will find the true source of divinity and accept the guidance of that light. Finally, I also want to ask you a favor, if one day Aman is sad and heartbroken, please protect him, as you once protected me. Gabriel looked at the letter, stood there thoughtfully without saying a word, and finally quietly put the letter away. Aman and the others did not disturb her, and Link said, Things here are done for the time being, are we going back to Salem? I intend to hold a ceremony for the shrine to summon the gods, and now that there is a chief priest, I can ask Lord George to preside over it. Aman, summon the gods. I am also on that altar, and I will go to Salem myself, so it doesn't matter if I come or not. But Murin has been waiting for this day, and after I walked out of Igut, she has not shown up to see me, so she should be waiting to see when I will fulfill my promise." Link winked and said, "The goddess hasn't seen you all this time. Don't you miss her a lot? Then this matter needs to be done quickly." Amon shook his head. "There's no need to be too anxious, this is also a celebration of the city. Let's wait here for a few more days, and wait for Elmar and John to arrive before we set off together, you might be surprised." They waited in the fortress that was being built for half a month, and Link didn't quite understand why Amon said he would be surprised. When John and Raphael walked out of the charcoal marsh half a month later, Link did not recognize Elmar at first, and only saw an enchanting girl beside Raphael wearing a robe that clearly did not fit, the attire of the Hittite kingdom's priests, and should be Raphael's clothes. Link looked left and right, and could not help but ask John, "Where's Elmar? Where did that big guy go? And who is this beautiful girl?" John smiled a little strangely, but did not answer. The girl twisted her waist and said, "I am an emissary of Ammonius, known as the guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh. Link, you can call me the goddess of the marsh, or the angel of Elmar." This girl actually called herself Elmar, and Link was dumbfounded and petrified. Amon's voice came from somewhere, "Elmar, congratulations. Raphael, thank you too. Have you found Bright Moon Knight's whereabouts?" Elmar bowed and replied, "We have been searching for traces along the way, but unfortunately we did not find him, and we were afraid of delaying your business, so we came out as soon as possible." Amon's voice continued, "It's good that you came out safely, he may have left the charcoal marsh, and since he was ordered to assassinate me, let me deal with him." "Guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh, who gave you this nickname?" Elmar laughed and said, "It's Raphael. He even praised me for being untainted by the mud." Raphael hurriedly explained, "Amon, I was just joking with Elmarch." Amon's voice chuckled, "That's a good joke, Elmarch. Since you call yourself that today, then you must protect the safety of the charcoal marsh's trade routes in the future. Let's return to Salem together first, there's a celebration to be held, it's already the end of the month, please support. Please. Thank you very much." Gabriel knelt on one knee in front of him, holding the battle axe high over his head with both hands and saying, "Amon, you win." Amon took the battle axe and put it away in his spatial artifact, then stood there and asked, "George, do you want to arbitrate?" George had not seen clearly how the two had decided the winner, but the scene in front of him had already explained the result, and he hurriedly stood up and said loudly, "There's no need for arbitrate, Lord Gabriel has admitted defeat." Amon pulled out his sword, patted the blade lightly on Gabriel's shoulder, and said with a smile, "Well, the duel is over, you may get up." Gabriel said, "You can kill me." Amon replied calmly, "I can kill you or not, according to the agreement of the duel, it should be up to me to decide. You are now my prisoner of war, and I will ask the Empire of Igut to pay a ransom for you, a noble warrior. If the Empire of Igut refuses, you will become my slave, and I have the right to give you back your freedom." Gabriel nodded and said, "It's like this, what do you plan to do?" Amon smiled, "This is the first time in my life that I've fought with someone in such a way, it's really enjoyable. I'm tired after fighting for so long, let's have a good drink and eat something. I will send a messenger to the pharaoh about the ransom, you can only wait for the result. Your mission has been completed, I still want to have a good talk with George." George had already come forward and said, "Two top warriors of the continent, the duel just now was really wonderful, but unfortunately I didn't get to see it clearly. Lord Gabriel, when did you become a warrior of the 8th rank? Even I didn't know." Gabriel stood up and replied, "Just now." George was taken aback, and after staring blankly for a while, he exclaimed, "Advance in battle? I've never heard of such a situation." Amon smiled and patted his shoulder, "So what if you haven't heard of it, now you've seen it with your own eyes, haven't you? I didn't expect this duel to only last for a day." "Let's continue drinking, we haven't finished talking yet." Everyone returned to the intact tent, looking at the time, it was time for dinner. Link cleaned up the broken utensils on the table, and Aman took out a variety of delicious food, inviting everyone to sit down and talk. George and Link both sat down, but Gabriel stood next to them. Link asked, "Why don't you sit down, aren't you tired?" Gabriel replied with a serious face, "My current identity is Aman's prisoner of war. Aman is sitting at this table, I should stand. Thank you Aman for freeing me, and thank you for the food in front of me." The Supreme Warrior's temper was stubborn enough, and he did everything very seriously. Aman had to say, "Then you can stand and eat, drink a few more glasses of wine, I specially prepared it for the two lords. George, the Supreme Warrior Gabriel has completed his mission, and you are also the one who came to kill me. What do you want to do? Do you also want to ask me for a duel?" George shook his head and said, "I'm not a supreme mage like Celia, how can I fight a supreme general like you without a summoned beast? If I really want to fight, it should be the Supreme Warrior Gabriel in front, and I fight in the back. That is the best way to deal with you. The Egyptian Empire sent the two of us to kill you, just because they want us to do so. Aman, but you didn't, how do you want to complete the task?" George sat in a chair and stretched his arms, his expression seeming very relaxed. "I accepted the order, but there are two kinds of tasks in this world, those that can be completed and those that can't be completed. Before I set out, I said that if I can't complete the task, I will not go back. I have long known your ability, and your power is far greater than when you led thousands of troops. It seems that I have to practice hard, otherwise I won't be able to complete the task. Ammonius, for the sake of an old friend, can you let me stay here and practice?" Aman and George looked at each other, and then both laughed, the laughter getting louder and louder, almost to the point of tears. Aman raised the jug and poured a glass of wine for George, saying, "You are no match for me, you can't complete the task. George, I can continue to practice and become stronger, maybe one day I will surpass you now." Aman blinked and said, "You may improve, but don't forget that I will continue to practice too. I was far inferior to you at the beginning, and now I have a 9th level achievement. George, then I'm afraid I'll have to stay here, will you take care of my food, drink, and accommodation?" Before Aman could answer, Link couldn't help but interject, "Lord George, if you are willing to stay in Salem, we would be more than happy. I will arrange everything, you can rest assured and live comfortably, just let me know if you have any requests." George suddenly let out a long sigh and said, "Continuing to break through is easier said than done. There are many people in the world who have awakened their power, but almost half of them die as first-level mages, unable to break through to the second level in their lives. There are so many warriors in the world, but how many of them can achieve a higher level? After Enkidu, I have not heard of anyone else who has achieved the 9th level, and now there is Aman. How difficult or lucky is it for a supreme mage to advance? I wonder if I can have that kind of luck." Aman smiled and comforted him, "Everything depends on one's own effort, just like a mission, there are those who can't and those who can. You were not born to be a supreme mage, were you? Lord George, there is also a shrine in Salem, and now a chief priest is needed to appease the people. If you stay in the city, you would be the most suitable candidate, I wonder if you would be willing?" George glanced at Aman, "You yourself are the most suitable, right?" Aman shook his head and said, "I'm not suitable, I'm already standing on the altar." George nodded. "Well, I can't live and eat for free, I have to do something. Before I complete the mission, I will be the chief high priest of Salem. It's a familiar job for me anyway, it's easy to do." Gabriel said in surprise, "Lord George, you want to be the chief high priest of Salem? But their shrine." George turned his head and interrupted her, "Great warrior Gabriel, you still don't know where I came from, do you? I was born as a sorcerer, and as a sorcerer, I achieved the highest level. The person who taught me was called Nietzsche. He was born as a miner in Duk, and he was also a supreme sorcerer. Now that Duk has become the city of Salem, and I came here, it may be the luck that guided me to a higher realm. Aman, if you want me to be the chief priest of Salem, there are two things I want to make clear." Aman held his glass and said, "Go ahead." George said unhurriedly, "Since I am the chief priest of Salem, then don't use the title of mage, just call me sorcerer, what do you think? In the city of Salem, not only the nobles, but everyone can receive guidance in learning magic. No, let's just call it magic. Amon and Link looked at each other and slapped the table. Of course we didn't ask, in fact, we are all born as sorcerers. But whether it's magic or magic, it can't be taught casually, it has a test requirement, and can only be guided to the right person. It has nothing to do with identity. George smiled and said, "Of course I know this, I am the chief priest, these specific matters are handled by the priests, I will tell you what to do. I also want to remind you of one thing, my mission is still to hunt you down, and maybe one day I will do it." Amon also smiled and said, "I'll wait." George waved his hand. "You don't have to be too nervous, I will tell you before I do it." Anyway, the Order of the Empire of Iga did not specify the time, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, if I live long enough, maybe 100 years. Amon raised his glass and said, "Then I wish you a long and healthy life." The two clinked their glasses and drank, and as soon as Gabriel saw this scene, he already knew that George did not intend to return to the Temple of Isis as a high priest. He chose to stay in Salem as the chief priest, on the one hand, because he did not want to carry out the mission of hunting down Amon, and on the other hand, he should have his own considerations. A supreme mage like him no longer pursued wealth, status, or even glory, but achievements in this life, and may have encountered a bottleneck that he could not break through in his training, and was looking for a new opportunity. Gabriel was pondering there when Amon suddenly turned around and handed over a cowhide envelope. "Want to know what Maria said to me?" "It's about you, see for yourself." Gabriel took the envelope and took out the papyrus inside, only to see that it read, "Gabriel had to accept the order of the Empire to hunt you down. I know her temper, she will only fight you, so that it does not violate her beliefs. She has lost her power now, just like you did back then, this is a test. I hope you can help and guide her through the test, but everything is up to her own choice, and I wish her and you well. Amon, I have always known what you are doing, and I understand your love and your pursuit." Gabriel held the papyrus for a long time and read the simple lines of words over and over again, his fingers trembling slightly. After a long time, he looked up and said, "I didn't mention it to anyone, so the adoratress saw through it and knew that I had lost my power, no wonder she asked me to give this letter to you before the fight." Amon sighed. "You never read this letter at all, although it has always been with you. How incredible it is for a warrior to hand a letter to his opponent before a duel, telling the opponent that he has lost his power. Maria may have been afraid that I would accidentally hurt you, so I asked you if you wanted to change the time and place, but you still insisted on the duel today." Gabriel replied, "Even if I did not lose my power, I knew that I was no match for you, and I knew the result when I asked for the duel. During the duel, I forgot what kind of power I once had, and just did what I could. No matter how strong you are, you will advance unconsciously during the battle." Amon asked with great interest, "I have a personal question. For a 7th level supreme warrior like you, when you advance to the 8th level, do you usually lose your power?" Gabriel replied, "Some do, some don't, the situation varies. It is said that this is a test of the gods for their people, and some people are given more difficulties." "Amon, what's the difference between knowing and not knowing?" "Gabriel, in terms of the power mastered, there doesn't seem to be much difference, but there should be a difference, I'm not too sure about this." Amon turned to George and asked, "When you advanced to the 8th level, did you also lose your power?" George shook his head. "No, it's just that for a period of time, I always felt that I did not have enough magic power to perform magic, so I lived in seclusion in the shrine until I had enough magic power to instantaneously cast supreme magic. As far as I know, 8th level supreme mages have different experiences and achievements. For example, Supreme Mage Julian, who died in battle, did not lose his power at all when he advanced. There must be some kind of clear guidance that I don't understand yet." Amon thought for a moment and asked, 9th level supreme mages like Li Kuei-yu, Gilgamesh, and Goliath, did they also lose their power when they advanced from the 7th level to the 8th level? George shook his head. "How would I know? No one will say it. Listening to you, you seem to understand the mystery behind it." Aman smiled, and with a flick of his finger, the wine in the jug gushed out strangely and condensed into the shape of a mountain on the table, from which several paths appeared, each leading to different heights. He explained, like climbing a mountain, there are many paths that can reach the same height. Some paths can go further, some paths may bypass certain obstacles but not reach the top of the mountain. There may only be one path or several paths that can eventually reach the top. George's eyes lit up, and he pointed to the hill of wine on the table and said, the same path, different people can climb different heights, some people can only stop at the foot of the mountain, others may reach the mountainside. Ammonius, if there is a chance, I would like to have a good talk with you in private. Link chuckled and said, Lord George, you finally called Ammonius by his name? It doesn't sound like a joke this time. If you want to stay in Salem as the chief priest, there will certainly be plenty of opportunities. After he finished speaking, he glanced at Gabriel again, and seeing that she was still holding Maria's letter and standing there in a daze, he asked Ammon again, Ammonius, Lord Gabriel is now your prisoner of war, how much ransom are you going to ask the Empire of Iga to pay? Ammon also glanced at Gabriel, and then replied lightly, I don't want ransom, I just want something from the Empire of Iga. George asked, what is it? The Supreme General must want something special, it's not someone, is it? This sentence was actually a joke, and the someone he was referring to was, of course, Maria. The Egyptian Empire could not agree to this condition, and Ammon could not make such a request. With another flick of his finger, Ammon put the wine on the table back into the flask, and said expressionlessly, if you want to ransom the supreme warrior Gabriel, my condition is the position of the chief god of the Empire of Nra. George's hand trembled, and he almost dropped the glass, and said in a trembling voice, my God, what kind of condition is that? Ammon replied coldly, the reform of Merneptah Pharaoh's divine system, the establishment of Nra as the only heavenly god, and Seth as the head of the angels representing the heavenly gods, has nothing to do with me. But he sent Gabriel and you to kill me in the name of the oracle, so my request is to deprive the oracle of its name. This condition may be unimaginable, but for this matter, it is only natural for me to make such a request. As for whether I agree or not, that is also a matter for the Empire of Iga itself, and it has nothing to do with me. The hidden meaning of these words could only be understood by the gods. In the name of believing in Nra as the only heavenly god, Seth occupied the position of the chief god of the Ennead and guided Merneptah Pharaoh to carry out a religious reform, but sent down an oracle to let the Empire of Iga send people to hunt down Ammon and prevent his people from returning to the plains of Duk. Now Ammon's condition was that if they wanted to ransom Ammon, they would have to exchange it with the position of the chief god believed in by the Empire of Iga. This was simply beyond the imagination of the world, and perhaps even the craziest madman would not be able to say such a thing. But calmly analyzing the causes and effects, the conditions proposed by Ammon, while inconceivable, were not unreasonable. It was impossible for the Empire of Iga to agree to such a condition in order to ransom a supreme warrior, and even saying it would be blasphemy, and Ammon did not want them to agree, he just wanted them to propose it. George and Link recovered from their shock and looked quietly at Gabriel again, thinking to themselves that this supreme warrior would probably never be able to return. The shock on Gabriel's face was indescribable, as if he had heard the most impossible language in the world. Night had fallen, and there were no lights in the valley, and Gabriel stood in the darkness and finally spoke, Ammon, you made such a condition to make it impossible for the Empire of Iga to ransom me. So what do you plan to do with me, as your slave or free me? Ammon asked in return, you don't have to ask these questions for now, I will make a decision when the Empire of Iga officially rejects my request. Now I just want to ask you one question, it must seem crazy to others for me to make such a condition, but you know the process of this matter, does it make sense? Gabriel pondered for a long time and finally nodded. It makes sense, but it is also your own idea. Ammon smiled. It is indeed just my own idea, and Merneptah can't stop me from thinking what I am thinking. If he is unhappy, then so be it, even if he flies into a rage in the palace. Gabriel, Maria entrusted you to give me a letter, did she not tell you anything? Gabriel, the adoratress also gave me a letter, and specifically told me to open it only after the deed is done. I haven't had time to read it yet, so I don't know what it says. Ammon waved his hand. Then read it. If you don't want to say it, I won't ask. Gabriel took out another cowhide envelope from his arms, opened it, and pulled out a piece of straw paper. In the dim light of the night, he read the words on it. You have lost your power, I know that, and I have also told Ammon. I know your personality very well, and only a formal duel with Ammon according to aristocratic etiquette can free you from your mission. Even if you have lost your power, you will still make this request. Otherwise, you will not pass the test, and only when you make a choice will you receive true guidance. Now that you have seen this letter, perhaps you have passed the test and will face another choice. Ammon will make a ransom request that the Empire of Igut simply cannot accept, and you will become his prisoner of war, and after the Empire of Igut formally rejects it, he will release you and return your freedom. At that time, what kind of guidance will you receive in your faith? I know your faith very well, and there is no need to deliberately change it. I also know your faith in the gods, which is the light in your heart. I hope that you will find the true source of divinity and accept the guidance of that light. Finally, I also want to ask you a favor. If one day Ammon is sad and heartbroken, please protect him, as you once protected me. Gabriel looked at the letter, stood there thoughtfully without saying a word, and finally quietly put the letter away. Ammon and the others did not disturb her, and Link said, "Things here are done for the time being. Are we going back to Salem? I intend to hold a ceremony for the shrine to summon the gods, and now that there is a chief priest, I can ask Lord George to preside over it." Ammon, summon the gods. I am also on that altar, and I will go to Salem myself, so it doesn't matter if I come or not. But Murin has been waiting for this day, and after I walked out of Igut, she has not shown up to see me, so she should be waiting to see when I will fulfill my promise. Link winked and said, "The goddess hasn't seen you all this time. Don't you miss her a lot? Then this matter needs to be done quickly." Ammon shook his head. "There's no need to be too anxious, this is also a celebration of the city. Let's wait here for a few more days, and wait for Elmar and John to arrive before we set off together. You might be surprised." They waited in the fortress that was being built for half a month, and Link didn't quite understand why Ammon said he would be surprised. When John and Raphael walked out of the charcoal marsh half a month later, Link did not recognize Elmar at first, and only saw an enchanting girl beside Raphael wearing a robe that clearly did not fit, the attire of the Hittite kingdom's priests, and should be Raphael's clothes. Link looked left and right, and could not help but ask John, "Where's Elmar? Where did that big guy go? And who is this beautiful girl?" John smiled a little strangely, but did not answer. The girl twisted her waist and said, "I am an emissary of Ammonius, known as the guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh. Link, you can call me the goddess of the marsh, or the angel of Elmar." This girl actually called herself Elmar, and Link was dumbfounded and petrified. Ammon's voice came from somewhere, "Elmar, congratulations. Raphael, thank you too. Have you found Bright Moon Knight's whereabouts?" Elmar bowed and replied, "We have been searching for traces along the way, but unfortunately we did not find him, and we were afraid of delaying your business, so we came out as soon as possible." Ammon's voice continued, "It's good that you came out safely. He may have left the charcoal marsh, and since he was ordered to assassinate me, let me deal with him." "Guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh, who gave you this nickname?" Elmar laughed and said, "It's Raphael. He even praised me for being untainted by the mud." Raphael hurriedly explained, "Ammon, I was just joking with Elmarch." Ammon's voice chuckled. "That's a good joke, Elmarch. Since you call yourself that today, then you must protect the safety of the charcoal marsh's trade routes in the future. Let's return to Salem together first, there's a celebration to be held." Chapter 218. 200. Major event. This major event was related to the two kingdoms, and the king of Hittite, Assyria, actually made a request to the city of Salem. The city of Salem was nominally established in the territory of the Hittite kingdom, and the trade route entrance to the charcoal marsh was also controlled by the Hittite kingdom. King Asher's use of a request, in the name of a request, was already giving a lot of face, which was actually tantamount to an order. This was the cause and effect of the matter. After the battle, Aesop had to fulfill his pre-war promise as soon as possible and reward the meritorious warriors in order to attract more people to serve the city of Salem. But many of the dead warriors were foreign explorers and peasants, who had no family in the city of Salem, and could not even find someone to compensate them. If the situation had been different, it would have been fine. It was not that the city of Salem did not want to reward them, but that these people did not have the life to receive it. But after Joshua and Aesop discussed it, they issued a very interesting decree. According to the prior agreement, the warriors would receive corresponding land on the plains of Duk according to the size of their military exploits. Many of the warriors who had fought in the war had died, but the city of Salem still granted them land. The city of Salem announced the list of these people, their identities, and the land they had received, and made an announcement that if the legal heirs of these fallen soldiers came to the city of Salem, as long as they could prove their identity, they could register with the city's agriculture department to receive the land rewarded. The largest number of dead warriors were the peasants sent by Saya, who died in battle on the plains of Duk, but left their heirs land, which many people could hardly believe after hearing about. So there was an endless stream of people from the Hittite territory to the city of Salem through the trade route of the charcoal marsh, some of whom came to inherit their fiefdoms, others came to seek refuge in the city of Salem in search of opportunities. This decree of the city of Salem was very attractive, and it was simply a blessing for the hooligans and proletarians everywhere on the continent. Through the new policies formulated by Joshua, Aesop gathered an even larger population in the city of Salem in a short period of time after the war, with the number of registered residents exceeding 10,000. The two trade routes in the direction of Charcoal Marsh and Marduk City were also unprecedentedly lively. At this moment, King Asher of Hittite sent Celia as an emissary to deliver a letter of credence to the city of Salem, making a request to Lord Aesop and Ammon behind the scenes. The Hittite kingdom was preparing to go to war with the kingdom of Babylon again, and the first target to be attacked was the city of Marduk in the southeast corner of the plains of Duk, and the battle plan was to seize the land east of the inland lake and west of the Euphrates River. King Asher planned to send 2 legions to flank them from the north of Hunan. The southern legion, of course, marched along the Saya Desert, while the northern army had to cross the plains of Duk. It was difficult for large legions to enter the plains of Duk, but after the opening of the trade routes in the charcoal marsh, this tactic became possible. The exit of the trade route was in the hands of the city of Salem. So King Asher requested to pass through the territory controlled by Salem, and then head south to attack the city of Marduk. This request made it difficult for Aesop to agree, but also impossible to refuse. Why did the king of Hittite want to launch a war against the kingdom of Babylon at this time? The reasons were complicated, but the most important was that the young king wanted to make up for a regret in his heart, and also to realize his great dream of expanding his territory. When Asher was still a prince, he fought a great battle against the Babylon army as commander-in-chief with the assistance of Goliath, and had clearly won a great victory, but because of the sudden death of his father and the usurpation of his brother, Prince Feng Nu, who came to negotiate with the kingdom of Babylon, picked up a big bargain. This was a regret that Asher had never forgotten. Asher also had the dream and ambition to leave a lasting legacy in the history of the kingdom, and when his position was stable and the domestic situation was stable, he wanted to raise troops to punish the kingdom of Babylon, which had offended Hittite. There was almost no need for an excuse for this war, because the newly established city of Marduk by the kingdom of Babylon was in the territory of Hittite, and although the Hittite kingdom had never really controlled that place, it was still the nominal territory of the kingdom. Another goal of the war was to achieve the results that should have been achieved in the past, which was to repel the kingdom of Babylon to the east of the Euphrates River. As for the next step, the bigger strategic goal, Asher did not say, but it could also be guessed that if the city of Marduk and the land west of the Euphrates River were captured, it might not be impossible to control the entire plains of Duk. But this was only a distant goal, and the first thing to do was to achieve the first victory. After learning of King Asher's plan, Goliath neither encouraged nor objected, he just excused himself by saying that he was old and wanted to concentrate on the study of magic, and would no longer interfere in the matter. Goliath's reputation had spread throughout the kingdom, and he had become a figure second only to the gods, and King Asher had endured too long under the glory of the old man's figure. This time, King Asher had intended to rely entirely on his own prestige and wisdom to achieve meritorious service, and the battle plan was also personally formulated. Goliath understood the young king's thoughts very well, knew why Asher wanted to start this war, and knew that he could not persuade him even if he wanted to, so he did not express his opinion. In fact, King Asher started this war because of an oracle, which Enlil had just sent down at this time, instructing the Hittite kingdom to attack the kingdom of Babylon. This oracle completely catered to King Asher's intentions, and it was already impossible to change his mind. The battle plan of a two-front pincer attack was to send the Legion of Anu into the plains of Duk, which had to pass through the trade route controlled by the city of Salem. King Asher had written very clearly in the document that the legion he was sending was only passing through the route and would not threaten the city of Salem, and the target of the attack was the city of Marduk in the southeast. King Asher was also well aware that Salem was at war with the kingdom of Assyria in the north, and promised to keep the trade route through the charcoal marsh open so that Salem could receive continuous logistical support. The implication was that if Salem did not agree, he would order Saya to close the trade route. If Aesop agreed, it would be tantamount to putting an elite legion of the Hittite kingdom into the plains of Duk, and it was hard to guarantee that it would not be a threat. If the Hittite kingdom really took down the city of Marduk, it was hard to say whether they would take advantage of the situation to capture the entire plains of Duk, including Salem, in the future. If they took advantage of the battle between Salem and Enlil to launch a surprise attack from behind, they might take down Salem first. If there was a choice, Aesop definitely did not want this situation to happen, but if he refused this request, King Asher would only need to give an order to close the trade route in the charcoal marsh and cut off the logistical supply line that Salem currently desperately needed. Aesop, George, and the others could not make up their minds, so they came to the shrine and called for Amon's guidance. At this time, Link had been switched to the fortress that Raphael was originally guarding, while John was sent to guard another fortress. Aesop, George, Elmar, and Raphael, who were left in Salem, all came to the shrine and prayed to the statue, reading out the document sent by King Asher. They knew that Amon would definitely be able to hear it, and as long as he wanted to pay attention, he would reply. After reading the document, they heard Amon's voice: "For a request that cannot be refused, you can only consider how to agree to it. You must have discussed it. What exactly did you decide to do? Asher is sending a legion into the plains of Duk, and he should know what Salem is worried about, so there is no way he would not try to dispel your doubts." "What kind of promise did he make?" Aesop smiled bitterly. "Just now we only read out the document, and Celia sent another appointment. King Asher has appointed you as the Prince of Salem, the glorious Supreme General, a title and status that is only higher than when you were in Igut. The Hittite kingdom has also granted you a large territory, 200 miles around the city of Salem, which was awarded to you by Lazith II Pharaoh back then. He also promised to open up trade, levy taxes, and Salem only has to provide services to the kingdom during the war." Amon's voice had a smile in it. "This is something that we fought for ourselves, and he is very good at doing favors, giving it to me in the name of the kingdom. If I accept this appointment, it will be tantamount to officially incorporating Salem into the territory of the Hittite kingdom, and if I refuse this appointment, it means that Salem will not cooperate. In fact, this appointment is a promise made by the Hittite kingdom to Salem. How do you think we should deal with it?" George replied, "Actually, it is very easy. You are Ammonius, already training in the divine kingdom, and even the king's orders will not be able to be delivered. We will leave these documents in the city, but we cannot deliver them to you, and you neither need to accept nor refuse." Ammon: "Well, that is exactly how it should be handled. If we agree to the request of the Hittite kingdom, there are naturally pros and cons, so what is the biggest disadvantage?" George: "If we allow the Hittite kingdom's legion to enter the plains of Duk to attack Marduk city, then the trade route between us and Marduk city will be cut off, and all supplies will have to rely on the trade route in the charcoal marsh to replenish. Amon, the trade route in the charcoal marsh is much more important than the trade route in the direction of Marduk city, and if you refuse, the more important backup will be cut off. It is the lesser of two evils, and opening trade with the Hittite kingdom is exactly what Salem needs. Aesop added, in the long run, letting a legion into the hinterland of the plains of Duk is always a potential threat. Amon interrupted him, there will inevitably be more forces involved in the struggle for the plains of Duk, it's just a matter of time. Even without today's incident, there will be something else tomorrow, and even the current population of Salem is obviously too small, let alone 1,000 miles of fertile land. In the future, there will definitely be more than these 3 cities on the plains of Duk. George nodded repeatedly and said, there should indeed be such foresight. King Ashur chose a very good time. We resisted the invasion from the north, and he took the opportunity to enter the hinterland, and even if he did not attack Marduk city, he could have chosen a suitable place to establish a city. The final result of the discussion was naturally to agree to King Ashur's request, and not only to agree, but also to provide more assistance. The city of Salem would serve as a logistical transit station for the Hittite Kingdom Expeditionary Army, providing trading, stockpiling, and transportation services for military supplies, and would also become a foothold for a large number of logistical personnel of this legion after they entered the plains, showing an attitude of full cooperation. This kind of cooperation was exactly what the Expeditionary Army urgently needed, and in this way, it would also mean that the city of Salem would be brought to new prosperity. Not to mention anything else, a regular legion had tens of thousands of logistical personnel, and if they all settled in Salem, not only would they need to transport a large amount of supplies, but it would also be a very profitable business. On the other hand, the official combatants of the Hittite kingdom were not allowed to enter the city, and the defense of the fortress at the exit of the charcoal marsh trade route must also be the sole responsibility of Salem, and the Expeditionary Army was not allowed to intervene. The city of Salem built a total of 3 fortresses on the periphery, 2 of which were on either side of the northern main street, precisely to counter the city of Enril. The other fortress was on the edge of the charcoal marsh, guarding the exit of the trade route. If there was any movement on the side of the Hittite kingdom, as long as this fortress was closed, it would be equivalent to cutting off the most important logistical supply line of the Hittite Expeditionary Army. Agreeing to provide logistical services was based on the same idea, and if the cooperation was sincere, it would be beneficial to both sides, but if the Hittite kingdom had other intentions, then the logistical supply of the Expeditionary Army was in the hands of the city of Salem, and it would not be so easy to fall out with them. If King Ashur had no tricks up his sleeves, he should agree to these conditions that were beneficial to both sides. These countermeasures had already been discussed by Aesop and the others, and they were just asking for Amon's permission to make the final decision. Amon nodded in agreement, and finally said, "You have placed me on the altar, and I need to concentrate on training in pursuit of the true transcendence of eternal life, and I may not appear for many years, and even if I do appear, it may not be as Amon. The affairs of the city are up to the people of the city, and since it has been decided, let's do it well." The matter had been discussed, and Aesop and the others did not dare to disturb Ammonius' training any longer, and were about to bow and leave when Raphael touched his nose and coughed. "Ah, Ammonius, teacher Goliath wrote me a letter, and the letter also mentions something else, I think I should tell you." "Ammon, oh, what else did he say?" Raphael asked hesitantly, "Don't you think the appointment given to you by the Hittite kingdom is a little strange? You are not a member of the royal family. Why did they make an exception and give you the title of prince?" "Ammon, this King Ashur does things in a unique way. You are a Hittite noble and the high priest of Saya, I would like to hear your opinion." Raphael did not answer directly, but asked again, "Do you know why Ashur deliberately sent the supreme mage Celia as an envoy?" "As far as I know, the expeditionary force sent by the Hittite kingdom to the plains of Duk is the Legion of Anu, and Celia will be appointed as the chief priest. She is a princess of the kingdom, and her father is the younger brother of the former king Lucier." Before Ammon could say anything, Elmar became anxious and interrupted, "Why are you hesitating? If you have something to say, just say it. Do you still want Ammonius to play riddles with you?" Raphael continued a little embarrassedly, "This is what my teacher told me in private." He understands King Asher's intentions, and he hopes to marry Princess Celia to Ammonius. It's a long story. Celia was a princess of the kingdom, and she was young and beautiful, so she naturally had many suitors, even nobles of the surrounding kingdoms. But on the other hand, she was also a supreme mage, and this identity gave her the right to be arrogant. In other words, her standards were too high, and she did not like any of her many suitors. When Lucier was alive, he was worried about his niece's marriage, and once asked Celia, "What kind of man do you want to marry?" "All the heroes of the kingdom, as long as you take a fancy to them, I will immediately order the marriage." Celia replied, "I don't care about identity, my suitor should be more successful than me, and must defeat me in a duel." This sentence was tantamount to rejecting all suitors. Who could defeat a supreme mage? None of the suitors of Princess Celia had the ability to do so, not even thinking about it. As for those who had the ability, those supreme warriors or supreme mages had long been married and famous, and it was unlikely that they would pursue the princess of the kingdom. But then there was one thing that everyone knew, and that was the duel between Celia and Ammon won. This duel naturally had nothing to do with the pursuit of Celia, but people inevitably linked the two events together. There were many people in the capital of Igut talking about this matter, and many even said that only a great hero like Ammon was worthy of a supreme mage like Princess Celia. This time, King Asher deliberately sent Celia as an emissary to talk about cooperation, more or less to test whether Celia herself was willing to come to see Ammon, and Celia accepted the task. Conferring Ammon the title of Prince of Salem was already a hint, and if the two were really interested after they met, and Salem was willing to cooperate, King Asher would immediately act as a matchmaker. In a sense, this was also an idea of a political marriage, a means to control the city of Salem. Raphael explained the reason behind it, and George kept winking at him to stop him from continuing, but then he started coughing again, almost kicking him with his foot. There was still a statue of Murin standing on the altar, and it didn't seem appropriate to say this in person. Raphael finally said helplessly, "As far as Master Goliath knows, King Asher does have this idea, and it seems to have something to do with Enrol's oracle. As for the matters between the gods, I can't really comment." But King Asher did not say it explicitly. "Master just asked me to say hello to Ammonius, and it seems that there is no need to worry at the moment, because Ammonius did not appear in Salem at all." Ammon smiled and replied, "There's no need to talk about this anymore, I think King Asher himself is overthinking things." Raphael added, "It's no wonder that His Majesty King would overthink things, you really don't have a family, and what kind of girl would be worthy of a great hero like you? To be fair, Princess Celia is an 8th-level supreme mage, and it's rare for a woman on the continent to have such an achievement." Ammon, who was on the altar, was silent for a moment. Far away in the Garden of Eden, he inexplicably thought of another person, the adoratress of the Temple of Isis, Maria. The people in the shrine were waiting for Ammonius to speak, but suddenly they heard the statue let out a cry of surprise, "Gabriel, come quickly." Then there was silence, and no one could sense the gaze of the statue. Ammon suddenly left the shrine at this time, and was not even in the mood to listen to what was happening in Salem. George and the others looked at each other. Something big must have happened in the Garden of Eden. I bow to thank all my readers for their blessings, it's so touching. Coincidentally, the Dubhe just happened to complete 1,000,000 words today. Holding a cup in his right hand and pouring wine in his left, he celebrated himself. Chapter 219. 201. Ammon the heartbroken Ammon was sitting in the huge cave in the belly of the mountain, talking to George and the others through the incarnation of the statue in the city of Salem. When he was lost in thought about Maria, something suddenly flew out of his arms and hung in the air, emitting a soft light. It was a taroculus, which could be used to record all kinds of information after being refined by magic. Ammon had been carrying this parangon with him for several years. Back then, he was still the captain of the guards of the Temple of Isis archives, a 6th-level warrior, and Maria decided to send him deep into the plains of Duk to investigate the terrain after the flood receded. Before leaving, Maria gave him this special crystal and told him that there was some kind of information in it that he might see in the future. Amon did not read any information in this Taroculus at the time, and at first he thought that his realm was not enough. But later, when he had achieved the 9th level of the power of origin and became a godlike existence on Earth, he still could not read any information. But he could tell that this parangan had been specially processed and contained some kind of subtle reaction, which was the secret magic of the adoratress of Isis, which Amon did not understand very well. Today, this parangan suddenly flew out of his arms and was activated in the air. A blurry light and shadow first appeared in the belly of the mountain, and Maria's voice came from the light and shadow. Amon, I have something to say to you, call Gabriel over as well. Amon instantly realized what was going on with this parangan. It did not record any kind of information, but instead poured magical power into it and refined a sensing magic array with secret magic to transmit information over long distances. This transmission was one way, and Maria could send the information she wanted to tell him to Amon, but Amon could only see and listen, and could not say anything to Maria. In theory, the distance it could transmit information was infinite, but in reality, it was not without limits. This was related to the magical power that was poured into the creation process and the achievements of the caster. If Maria could sense its existence, she would be able to send a message over. However, she could only do it once. When the mana in the God's Stone was exhausted, the transmission would end and the God's Stone would be destroyed. Maria had given this parangan to Amon as a reward for his mission. She had only said one sentence at that time and had never mentioned it again. She had never asked if Amon had kept the parangan or used it for other purposes. However, Amon had always kept the God's Stone with him. He did not expect to suddenly receive a message from Maria today. In his shock, Amon momentarily forgot that he was talking to George and the others. He opened his eyes and shouted at Gabriel in the belly of the mountain. His voice penetrated the mountain wall and spread throughout the Garden of Eden. Then, he was not in the mood to say anything more. He stood up and looked at the light and sound coming from the Taroculus nervously. He did not even notice that Gabriel had walked into the belly of the mountain. Amon saw Maria again. She was actually dressed as a young girl in his memory. She did not wear a golden crown or a scepter. She wore a white dress and stood in the light and said gently, Amon, I am Eiko. All these years, there are some things that I could not say to you. When the day comes that I can really say it, maybe we will never meet again. Maybe everything has changed. Maybe I will be by your side. All these are unknown. I cannot imagine it, so I left you this Taroculus. It can let you see me from thousands of miles away and listen to me. When this day really comes, I did not expect it to end like this. Maybe you will blame me for being so cruel and letting you see all this with your own eyes? This is my home. My faith has never wavered. My faith has always been pure. But I have my struggles and aspirations, just like you have your struggles and aspirations. I know what you are doing and what you will face sooner or later. This is the last testimony that I can leave for you. I don't know if I should say it is a pity or a blessing in this life. My heart is in your heart, and there is no need to speak anymore. After she said this, the scene in the light and shadow changed. It became Maria wearing a golden crown and holding a scepter, praying to the goddess Isis in the shrine. Suddenly, Set's voice came from the void. Maria, your prayer has touched the gods. You will listen to the oracle of the archangel. This was what happened 3 months ago. Maria used message magic to reproduce this scene and sent it to Amon's eyes. After that conversation, Seth said coldly, I am only here today to tell you about the oracle that will come, not to ask for your consent. 3 months later, all the cities of the empire of Igut will send down oracles. The adoratress Maria will marry the pharaoh according to the guidance of the gods and become the chief high priest of the empire, symbolizing the final integration of the divine power and royal power of the upper and lower Igut. Whether you are willing or not, someone will announce all this for you. Even if you die, someone will dress up as you and complete the ceremony in your identity. This record will be left in the official history books of the Empire of Igut, and this story will be recorded in the poems chanted in the shrine. Prepare well, I will ask you again in 3 months, whether you will do it voluntarily or let me do it for you. It makes no difference to the Egyptian Empire. The light emitted by the Taraculus dimmed, then brightened again, and the light and shadow it emitted turned into another scene, which was what was happening in the distant temple of Isis at this moment. Maria stood in the main shrine, wearing a white dress without a golden crown, but she took out the scepter of the adoratress. The god's tear at the top of the scepter had a faint golden glow. There were no attendants around, and everyone had been sent away by the adoratress. At this time, the chief supreme warrior of the shrine, Ankh, came in and saluted, "Your Excellency, according to your instructions, everyone has been asked to stay 3 miles away from this hall, and the Legion of Isis has been ordered to enforce martial law." This is not a small movement, is it really the oracle of the gods? Why did the gods ask you to do this? The high priests are asking. Maria replied faintly, "Today, a miracle will appear here, an oracle that the archangel Seth had sent 3 months ago. I have ordered everyone to stay 3 miles away from this shrine for a reason, and it must be strictly enforced. Supreme Warrior Ankh, you must remember that no one is allowed to violate the order. You should also leave quickly and go 3 miles away." Ankh frowned slightly, "But how long do we have to wait?" "Maria, you will naturally understand when the time comes. Just restrain the people to wait 3 miles away and wait for the miracle to appear. Whoever dares to disobey the order and approach the shrine, arrest them on the spot regardless of their identity, and we will deal with them later." The adoratress, who had always been gentle, gave such a resolute order, and there was an awe-inspiring majesty to it. Ankh could not ask further, so he accepted the order and left. Shortly after he left, Seth's voice sounded in the shrine, "Maria, I came today to ask you if you have made a decision. Why did you expel everyone so far away? No one will be able to hear our conversation." Maria did not look in the direction of the voice, but only looked at the statue of Isis in front of her and replied calmly, "You told me that you were Seth, the head of the angels. But I only heard a voice, you can't prove your identity." There was obvious anger in Seth's voice. "You are a supreme mage and the adoratress of the temple of Isis, you should be able to tell who I am." Maria shook her head gently, "I have never seen Seth, I only heard your voice, and I don't know who is speaking to me in Seth's voice. Please don't forget, last time you claimed that you could also speak in the voice of the goddess Isis. If you really want to convey an oracle to me, please show your true form. Legend has it that you are very ugly, with the head of a donkey and the body of a human, but the statue is very handsome. I want to see your true face." In order to prevent idle people from peeking at the gods, I asked everyone to withdraw from the shrine and stay 3 miles away. Seth snorted coldly, "You actually want me to show up? Do you know that I am only here today to ask for your decision, but nothing will change because of your decision, you only need to answer yes or no." Maria looked at the god's tear on her staff, "I will only answer if I see you. If I don't see you, I won't make any decisions. You can ignore my thoughts, but don't forget that the adoratress with the staff in her hand also has great power. If I go all out, no one in Memphis will be my opponent. Your so-called plan will also become a joke." Seth sneered, "Without the identity of the adoratress, you are just a supreme mage with a powerful magic tool. Do you think you will be a match for the gods? No matter how strong your personal power is, you can't fight against the will of the empire, you will only bring destruction to yourself." Maria nodded, "I know, but that also requires a great price. Seth, do you only know how to hide in the clouds and give orders? Why don't you show up in person? Are you afraid of me?" As soon as the voice fell, Maria suddenly turned around, and a pervasive pressure appeared silently in the hall, and a figure appeared at the door, as if stepping out of the endless void. This person was an imposing man. He stood with his hands behind his back. His figure was well built, and his appearance was elegant. He was definitely not ugly. But his face was indeed a little long, and his eyes were a little small. To say that he had a donkey's head and a human's body was an exaggerated mockery. Maria had seen him many times, and this person was the archangel Seth on the altar. As soon as Seth appeared, he said coldly, "The adoratress of Isis symbolizes protection, blessing, and wisdom, and what you did was the most foolish choice. You could have become the high priest of the kingdom, the symbolic queen of Igut, as long as the mission of the adoratress of Isis was ended in your hands and the theocratic unification of the empire was completed. The goddess Isis is no longer here, and this is how things should be. Maria just looked at him, neither saluting nor answering, and the god's tear on the scepter kept flickering. Seth also stared at Maria, but the anger in his eyes gradually disappeared, and finally he said very calmly, "You can't be a match for the gods, and even if you are strong, you can't be my enemy. If I don't want to face you, you won't be able to see a true God who transcends eternal life. The reason why I showed up is just to tell you one thing." Maria finally spoke. "What do you want to tell me? Is it that the goddess Isis is no longer here, and the adoratress of Isis is no longer necessary to exist?" Seth did not answer or deny, and his tone changed. "You are already a 9th level mage, and you have just broken through the 9th level, haven't you? It's really rare. You are qualified to fill the position in the Ennead because of your achievements and luck, which I also admire very much. Now I can give you another choice. This is a gift from God, and it is the fruit of your own hard work. As long as you make an oath, you can be taken into the Ennead, share the secrets of the gods, become an angel, and have a chance to transcend eternal life in the future. I am your guide, and you only need to make an oath to me that in addition to being loyal to the Ennead, you only need to complete one more task, and that is to kill Amon, and the opportunity to become a god is right in front of you." Maria took a step forward. "I am surprised that you would change your mind and give me another choice. So what about the original choice? If I refuse, what are you going to do?" Seth said indifferently, "You cannot negotiate with the gods, this is the greatest blessing on earth. If you refuse, I don't know what else you want. Then you only have one choice left, and that is to destroy the spiritual imprint. I still need your identity to accomplish what I want to do, and whether it is a soulless body or not, people will only know that it is the adoratress of Maria." Maria took another step forward and said, "Are you so confident that you can do all this?" "Seth, anyway, there is only you and me here, so I will make it clear, even Horus is no match for me, and now that I have become the de facto king of the Ennead, it is not difficult to do all this. I just took a fancy to your qualifications and courage, so I gave you another choice." Maria slowly raised her scepter. "Seeing you appear from the void, I finally understood one thing: powerful warriors, or mages, can fight the gods on earth, but they cannot enter the world that belongs to the gods. In the battle between the gods and mortals, as long as they are not willing to show up, they are invincible. But you have shown up, and you are standing too close to me." A gray scroll appeared out of thin air. It was the Tiamat's wrath that she took from Amon. Crazy Ol remembered that when he made the iron staff, it was modeled after the scepter of the adoratress of the temple of Isis, and the ventosylum inlaid on the scepter was also a refined spatial artifact. When Maria raised her scepter, the scroll in the ventosylum was released. Seth shouted, "What is this?" "Maria, don't tell me you don't know about Tiamat's wrath." Seth curled his lips. "Tiamat's wrath? I know very well that the temple of Isis wanted to make it but failed, and you are just trying to scare me with such an empty shell. I want to tell you, even the real Tiamat's wrath can't destroy me, the legends on earth are just exaggerations." Maria took another step forward. "I just want to try." Seth wanted to retreat, but his figure blurred as if he was about to disappear into the void, but then he became clear again, and he could not help but reveal fear in his tone. "How do you know this secret?" "What secret?" Maria immediately gave the answer, her pink face cold. "After all, I am the adoratress of the temple of Isis, I know some things. When the gods are locked in combat, they cannot leave this world freely, unless you can break free from my lock. Unfortunately, it is too late." Seth shouted, and a staff appeared in his hand, but the great Tiamat's wrath happened to spread at this time. A terrible breath broke out, and there was darkness between heaven and earth. The light seemed to be swallowed by a black hole that suddenly appeared, without even making a sound, and the surrounding objects were constantly sucked in, like a storm sweeping through, everything turned into nothingness. The priests of the temple of Isis were ordered by the adoratress to retreat 3 miles away from the main shrine. As the main shrine was close to the shrine square, 2 nearby residential areas had to be evacuated within 3 miles of the main shrine. Ankh sent the Legion of Isis to stand guard, and no one was allowed to enter this area, waiting for the miracle to happen. There was a lot of discussion, asking the adoratress what miracle she wanted everyone to wait for, but Ankh could not answer. At this moment, several high priests suddenly let out a muffled groan in unison, feeling an unsettling horror. They lowered their heads and covered their chests, as if their hearts were inexplicably squeezed, and for a moment, it was as if their blood had frozen, and they could not breathe. The supreme mages with the highest achievements felt it the most, while the ordinary people looked up in the direction of the main shrine, alarmed by the inexplicable terrible breath. In the distance, the sky and the earth were being swallowed by a dark storm that suddenly appeared, and the light seemed to disappear into a black hole vortex. The terrible storm was constantly expanding with the breath of destruction. Many people let out a cry of alarm, turned around and ran, as if there were evil spirits chasing after them. The 9th-level Supreme Mage Vord covered his chest and shouted, "Ankh, order the army to retreat." The black light swelled and engulfed heaven and earth, and it seemed that it would spread in front of the crowd in a few breaths. The soldiers of the Legion of Isis and the onlookers flew back like the tide. But the range of the black light was not that far, and it only destroyed all the buildings about a mile around the main shrine before slowly disappearing. The magnificent main shrine of Isis and the side halls on both sides had been reduced to scorched earth. There was only a long mournful hiss, and a figure rose into the sky in the black light, quickly disappearing into the sky. No one could see who it was. Seth escaped with serious injuries, and he did not even look back. Echo! Thousands of miles away, a heart-wrenching cry resounded through the Garden of Eden, and a figure flew out of the belly of the mountain, directly breaking through the barrier of the spatial magic formation and rushing out. Peloponnes, who was building the spatial magic formation, was startled. Amon did not even look at where he was and rushed out of the magic formation she had just built was forcibly destroyed. What on earth happened that made the usually calm and stoic Amon lose his mind and rush out of the Garden of Eden just like that? As soon as Amon flew away, a white light flashed, and Gabriel also flew in the direction Amon left, not even having time to say a word. Peloponnes and Moses looked at each other, not knowing what had happened to the two of them. In the hollow of the belly of the mountain in the Garden of Eden, there was a spray of blood on the ground, and among the blood was the broken parangan. Chapter 220. 202, the days of leaving the gods. Amon left just like that, and the people in the shrine of Salem could no longer feel Amon's gaze, and he no longer listened to the calls of the believers. At the most complicated and critical moment of the struggle on the plains of Duk, Amon left amidst the admiration, praise, and anticipation of tens of thousands of people. It was not only him who left, but his mind also disappeared, and the incarnation of the statue on the altar seemed to have fallen into a closed sleep. At that time, the people in the shrine did not know what had happened, and Link rushed to the Garden of Eden to meet the confused Medanzo. Medanzo did not know when Amon left, as he was meditating in his cave abode when a long hiss of pain woke him up, and he was almost engulfed by the sudden disturbance in the spiritual world. He hurried from the cave abode to hear that both Ammonius and Gabriel were gone, and Peloponnes and Moses did not know what had happened. Link panicked a little, and for so long, he had always been full of confidence in everything he did, but this was the first time he had lost his backbone, and he was a little panicked and at a loss. The disciples searched the Euphrates Valley and the plains of Duk for a long time like headless flies, but neither found any trace of Amon nor heard any news of him. In desperation, George convened a secret meeting in the city of Salem. They did not know what urgent situation Ammonius had encountered, but now that they did not have Ammonius' help, it was up to the people of Salem to face the future on their own. Ammonius had already given them guidance, and they could not lose faith because of his departure. The Legion of Anu of the Hittite kingdom was about to enter the plains of Duk through the charcoal marsh, and the news of Amon's departure must be kept secret, otherwise it would cause unrest among the people of the city. The conflict and friction between the city of Salem and the city of Enril in the north were still ongoing, and no one could get away. Medanzo, who had lost his power and was facing a trial, walked out of the Garden of Eden and volunteered to search for Amon. He guessed that Amon had probably gone to Igut. Link said worriedly, "You've lost your power, and this journey of tens of thousands of miles will be very dangerous. You might as well let me go." Medanzo shook his head. "You can't leave Salem now, and I am the leader of Ammonius' disciples, so I should be looking for Ammonius' whereabouts. Although I couldn't use my magic power, I was still a strong warrior. Relying on my profound martial skills and perfect physique, I was even stronger than an ordinary intermediate warrior. Back then, I was only a 4th-level warrior. I crossed thousands of mountains and rivers to your tribe to smuggle damask steel ingots. Don't tell me that I'm afraid to travel far now." Link was helpless, and he was also eager to know Amon's whereabouts, so he had to agree to Medanzo disguise himself as a merchant and leave, blending into Aesop's caravan to travel to the distant Igut. Medanzo also made one last effort to find news of Amon before he set off. He asked Link to secretly convey Allah's oracle as an emissary, so that the Duk miners could build a shrine and hold a ceremony to summon the gods. The miners of Duk believed in their only god, Allah, and after arriving in the city of Salem, they set up the big tent in the middle of the open space and placed the golden tablets with the 10 agreements written on them as a temporary shrine. Aesop ordered people to build houses for them and agreed to build their own shrine in the city, but soon the war broke out and the progress of the project was delayed. At this moment, manpower was mobilized to quickly complete the main body of the shrine, and what was enshrined on the altar was not the statue of Allah, but the cross of light that symbolized the glory of Allah. On the day of the main shrine's completion, the 12 judges summoned their people to hold a ceremony to summon the gods, while Link, George, John, and others hid in the dark to watch. Disappointingly, Amon did not descend on the altar. Did Amon really abandon the city of Salem and his people? Medanzo was about to set off to find Amon, and everything was ready, but he was not able to leave. On that night, Link prayed to the statue of Amon and could no longer feel the firm gaze that had been there for a long time. He suddenly felt a wave of weakness, and his magic seemed to have disappeared with Ammonius' departure. Coincidentally, when Medanzo was packing up at night wearing a soft armor with a hidden sharp blade, he inadvertently waved the short blade made from the fangs of the two-headed monster, and as a result, he heard the familiar roar of the monster, and his magic power actually recovered at this time. Medanzo inexplicably passed the test and obtained the 8th-level achievement of the Power of Origin, and Link's test came at the same time. Medanzo had to replace Link and stay in the city of Salem. Link had planned to replace Medanzo and go to Igut, but he was stopped by the others, and Medanzo, as the leader of the disciples, forced him to go to the Garden of Eden to train. Medanzo, who had passed the test, looked back at his own experience, and understood in his heart that the test Link faced was not simple. The opportunity came too coincidentally, and it was related to Ammonius' disappearance. It was likely that he would have to wait until the day Ammonius returned for Link to break through the obstacles in his heart and obtain the 8th-level achievement. Link finally agreed to go to the Garden of Eden to train, because everyone heard Murin's voice in time. Murin finally spoke on the altar, and she told everyone a shocking news. Something major had happened in Igut, and the adoratress of the Temple of Isis had ordered everyone to leave the temple and unleash the Tiamat's wrath to kill the demon that had descended on Earth. This was the official announcement issued by the Igut officials to the public, and it was also recorded in the history books of Igut. The people had infinite respect for the adoratress, and they expressed their memories in various ways. Of course, such a big thing could not be covered up, and the Igut officials had to give the people an acceptable explanation, so it became this way. But Murin told Medanzo and the others that what Maria tried to kill with the scroll was not some demon that had descended on the temple, but the archangel Seth, who was now worshipped by the empire of Igut. Seth did not die, but fled back to the Holy Kingdom with serious injuries, and would not appear again in a short period of time. If Amon wanted to find Seth for revenge, it was absolutely impossible to find him. Finally, they knew what had happened. This was probably the only thing in the world that could make Amon rush out of the Garden of Eden like a madman. The young man, who had always been like a god, had his heart broken. Even if the disciples found him, they might not be able to comfort him. Since Murin had already heard about this, perhaps only this god had a way to find and comfort Amon. Gabriel also saw everything in the light and shadow of the Taraculus. When the Tiamat's wrath unfolded, the light and shadow disappeared. Amon swayed and fell to the ground, spewing blood and letting out a long hiss that shook the Garden of Eden, and then flew out. By the time Gabriel chased out of the Garden of Eden, Amon was long gone. Gabriel was a warrior. She had personally witnessed many sacrifices and deaths, and was ready to sacrifice herself at any time. She had always been courageous on the battlefield. When she left the empire of Igut, she knew Maria's situation in her heart, but she did not expect this to be the result. At this time, she finally understood why Maria wrote her that letter, and Gabriel remembered what Maria said in the letter. Now that you have seen this letter, perhaps you have passed the test, and will face another choice. Amon will make a ransom request that the empire of Igut cannot accept. You will become his prisoner of war, and after the empire of Igut officially refuses, he will release you and return your freedom. At that time, what kind of guidance will you receive in your faith? I know your faith very well, and there is no need to deliberately change it. I also know your faith in the gods, that is the light of your heart. I hope you find the true source of divinity and accept the guidance of that light. Finally, I want to ask you a favor. If one day Amon is sad and heartbroken, please protect him, just like you once protected me. Gabriel, who had always been strong and unafraid of death, was now in tears. Her first thought was to rush to the Igut. But what could she do if she rushed to the Igut? The light and shadow shown by the Taraculus ended when the Tiamat's wrath unfolded. Neither Amon nor Gabriel knew what happened after that, nor did they know if Seth was still alive. The archangel was likely to have perished together with Maria. If that was the case, even if they wanted to take revenge, they could not find the target. This was the most heartbreaking torture. The Tiamat's wrath had already unfolded, and it was impossible for Maria to still be there, but Amon must go to Montefiore in person. He must also confirm Seth's whereabouts. If Seth was still alive, Amon would definitely find this god for revenge. Gabriel had the same idea as Amon. If Seth was still alive, she must kill this god with her own hands. But she had another task, which Maria had already told her long ago. She had to find and protect the heartbroken Amon. Gabriel had comprehended the power of the origin, but comprehending it did not mean possessing it. She was an 8th-level supreme warrior, and she needed to verify and practice again. Fortunately, she had the foundation of the second awakening before, and the verification of the power of the origin was very fast. Now that she had achieved the 6th level of magic, she could operate a shuttle. Amon had once given her a flying shuttle, so that she could travel in the Garden of Eden. She used this shuttle to chase after the enemies. After chasing for a day and a night without seeing Amon, Gabriel calmed down from her grief. She was also thinking about how to find Amon. In her opinion, it was indeed too cruel for Maria to let Amon see that scene with his own eyes. The Adoratress had always taken good care of Supreme General Amon. Her silent love, selfless help, and silent tenderness. In the end, she let Amon see that scene. Perhaps even Maria herself did not think that the Taraculus should not have been used like that. Thinking carefully about what Maria and Seth had said, it was conveying a very important message to Amon. One was that if the gods did not want to meet mortals, mortals could not see them at all, no matter how capable they were. The second was that if they were locked in combat, the gods could not leave the world at will. To deal with a god who had transcended eternal life, one must force him to show up and use powerful magic to lock him at a close enough distance. If Seth was not dead, and Amon wanted revenge, would Seth give him this chance? What could Amon do to force Seth to show up? If one wanted to destroy the gods, the best prerequisite was to become a god who had transcended eternal life himself. This was the last testimony that Maria had left for Amon. Gabriel did not know where to find Amon, but she first had to understand what had happened in the Empire of Igut. She could do it in her own way. The Supreme Warrior returned to the territory of Igut alone and first met with Roddick. Rod Dick was woken up in his sleep by Gabriel in his bedroom in the mayor's mansion. The mayor was so scared that he almost fell out of bed, but the woman who accompanied him had been sleeping soundly. Obviously, she had been knocked out by Gabriel. The supreme warrior was sitting in the darkness, holding a battle axe in his hand that had traces of electricity flowing around it. Rod Dick was half relieved after recognizing her. He had not offended Gabriel, and she had no reason to assassinate him. He wrapped himself in the bed and asked, trembling, Master Gabriel, why are you here all of a sudden? Gabriel reached out and stroked the battle axe, replying expressionlessly, Master, the guards of your mansion should be strengthened. If I were an assassin, you would have been beheaded long ago. Don't be afraid, I just want to ask you, what happened in Montefiore? As soon as she arrived in Igut, she came to find Rod Dick. The mayor of Straits had always been well informed, and the various decrees of the Empire of Igut would be sent to the city lords as soon as possible. There were some things that ordinary people could not know. Rod Dick understood as soon as he heard it and quickly replied, Are you here for the matter of the Adoratress? I just got the exact news yesterday. The Adoratress of the Temple of Isis, Maria, received an oracle from Seth that a terrible demon would come to the world and bring disaster to Montefiore. So the Adoratress ordered the priests of the temple and the people of the city to retreat 3 miles away from the main temple, and when the demon came, they would use the power given by the gods to destroy it. This was the official announcement of Igut. According to internal news from the capital, Merneptah Pharaoh would also posthumously confer the title of the Adoratress Maria as the chief high priest of the empire, and worship her in the main temple of the empire, which was the highest honor that the heroes of the empire could enjoy. This decree had not yet been announced, because Merneptah also planned to announce another thing. The main temple of Isis had been destroyed, and Merneptah planned to rebuild it, but instead of building the original temple, he would build the temple of Seth on its original site, making Seth the new guardian god of Lower Igut to commemorate this major event. Merneptah gave Maria the highest honor that the kingdom could enjoy in its history, and the glory of the Adoratress of the Temple of Isis reached its peak, but its mission of inheritance also ended in the hands of Maria. After listening, Gabriel asked again, Mayor Dick, do you really believe that a demon has come to the Temple of Isis? Perhaps it was because the night air was too cold, Rod Dick couldn't help but shiver, and he lowered his voice and said, according to the grapevine from Montefiore, the last person the Adoratress saw was the supreme warrior Ankh. She asked Ankh to send the Legion of Isis to guard a place far away from the temple, and no one was allowed to approach. Several high priests of the temple have also said in private that the scene at the main temple was clearly someone unleashing Tiamat's wrath. As far as I know, in the past 100 years, only Nero has successfully made a Tiamat's wrath on the continent, and Supreme General Amon obtained Nero's relic. With the relationship between the Supreme General and the Adoratress, it is entirely possible that he gave this Tiamat's wrath to the Adoratress. I heard that the Adoratress had just recently advanced to the 9th level of Supreme Mages and possessed the incomparably powerful scepter of the Adoratress. If she wanted to deal with any demon, would she need to unleash Tiamat's wrath and sacrifice herself? No matter how powerful the demon was, she could summon all the high priests of the Temple of Isis or even the Legion of Isis to besiege it without having to do it herself. So some people say. Rod Dick stopped talking at this point, and Gabriel took over, so some people say that what the Adoratress wanted to destroy was actually a god. And before the battle happened, the name she mentioned was the Archangel Seth. Rod Dick shuddered again. These are just private discussions, no one dares to say it out loud. But at that time, many people heard a long hiss and saw a figure rushing into the sky to escape. Gabriel was taken aback, stood up and asked, Is that person not dead? The Adoratress had already unleashed Tiamat's wrath, but he was still able to escape with his life. Rod Dick, no one saw who it was, so it's not easy to speculate, but I'm afraid that only a god can escape from Tiamat's wrath. Lord Gabriel, I have told you everything I know, including what should be said and what should not be said. Only then did Gabriel realize that she had walked to the bed with the axe in her hand, and this posture frightened Rod Dick. She sighed and put away the axe, looked at Rod Dick and said, 7 years ago, it was you and I who sent Maria to Montefiore. In order to make her the adoratress, we also took her to Duk to find the god's tear. Do you remember Maria at that time? She was just a child, and we sent her to Duk. We also have our responsibility. The first person Gabriel came to was Rod Dick, not only to ask for information, but also to remember Maria. There was an indescribable sadness and emotion in her soul. Back then, she was also alone. She came all the way to Cape with a sword to protect Maria, the candidate for the adoratress. Later, under the persuasion of Rod Dick, she went to Duk to find the god's tear. The first time Gabriel saw Maria, he felt that she should be the adoratress of the temple of Isis, and Rod Dick really found the god's tear. From the beginning, Gabriel felt that he had a responsibility to protect the adoratress, not only because of her identity as a supreme warrior of the shrine, but also because of Rod Dick, who was also involved in this incident. There was also a very special episode in this incident. At that time, the person who seemed to be insignificant, but he played a decisive role. It was the child of Duk, Ammon, who mined the god's tear. Because of this, Maria became the adoratress, and Ammon was forced to leave his hometown as a punishment for stealing the god's tear, without permission. That was how he obtained Nero's relics. Chapter 221. Gabriel replied, "If you have news of Ammon, inform the people in the plains of Duk to evacuate the city of Leng. I know you are very resourceful, and it is not difficult to send someone to sneak into the caravan to deliver the message. People are looking for him, and so am I. Supreme General Ammon should have arrived at Igut by now. Didn't he come to see you?" Rod Dick shook his head and said, "No, the Supreme General did not come to see me. No, what I had a few days ago was not a dream." At this point, he suddenly raised his head with a look of horror on his face and recalled, "I had a dream a few days ago. Supreme General Ammon was standing at the head of the bed and looking at me. I woke up with fright, but there was no one in the room." Gabriel was also startled. "It seems that Supreme General Ammon has been here, because it was you who sent Lady Maria to Duk back then, and she became the adoratress. I am worried that what happened to the adoratress will make him lose his mind, and I am really glad that you are still alive." After saying this, Gabriel left, but Rod Dick did not dare to go back to sleep. He put on his clothes, got out of bed, took off his sword, and sat in the room until dawn. After dawn, he summoned the chief priest of the Angira Legion and the priests in the shrine, saying that now that a chaotic battle had broken out in the plains of Duk, Strait should also be on guard, and that the guards of the governor's office should be strengthened. He ordered the mages and the craftsmen in the city to build an alert magic formation to be placed in his mansion. Rod Dick was now also the head of the Angira Legion, and since the chief priest George had left and never returned, he had asked the pharaoh to send another supreme mage to Strait in the name of stabilizing the border. As a result, an honorary high priest, Ibn, was transferred from the temple of Isis to serve as the chief priest of Strait and the Angira Legion. Ibn did not understand why the governor suddenly wanted to strengthen the security and guard of the governor's mansion, but he did as he was told. Rod Dick was not worried that Gabriel or Ammon would come to assassinate him, but last night's experience had really frightened him. If there really was an assassin as capable as Ammon or Gabriel, then he would be in great danger, and it was better to take precautions. After leaving Strait, Gabriel traveled day and night to Montefiore, and the main shrine of Isis that she was once so familiar with had turned into a scorched earth. Half of the shrine square had been destroyed, and there were guards on duty at the edge of the square to prevent ordinary people from approaching. It was said that a shrine of Seth would be built here, and there would be a special place for Maria in the side hall. Ammon would definitely come here, or he had already been here. Gabriel wandered around the square for several days, but never found Ammon. After the destruction of the main shrine of Isis, the chief supreme warrior of the shrine and the commander of the Legion of Isis, Dick, was the busiest and most nervous person in Montefiore. He had to answer questions from all sides, and wrote a detailed report to the pharaohs of Igut. The atmosphere in Montefiore was also very tense, and he had to strengthen patrols to prevent any more trouble at this time. It was not until more than a month later that the official announcement of the Empire of Igut was issued, and the incident was considered to have a clear official statement, that Drick was slightly relieved. On this day, he still personally led the guards to patrol the city, and when he passed by the ruins of the Temple of Isis, he sighed inexplicably, stopped his horse for a moment, and then continued to move forward, returning to his office. Just as he dismounted, a man came to the door of the mansion, and shouted in a low and clear voice, "Lord Drick, do you have time to talk?" Hearing this voice, Drick was taken aback, and the surrounding guards were about to stop him, but he quickly waved his hand. "This is my friend, quickly invite him into the mansion and close the door." The man wore a cloak to cover his face, and followed Drick into the mansion. When they came to a small reception hall, Drick sent the servants away and asked, "Gabriel, how dare you return to Montefiore?" Gabriel took off his cloak and said, "I was ordered to kill Amon, and as a warrior, I asked for a duel. I was defeated in the duel and became a prisoner. The Empire of Igut refused the Supreme General's request for a ransom, and he can decide how to deal with the prisoner, so he released me. I did not violate any imperial laws, so why can't I come back? Commander Drick, you are in charge of the security of Montefiore. May I ask if you want to arrest me, and for what reason?" Drick's expression was a bit awkward, and he said in a low voice, "What you said is the truth. Of course I won't arrest you, and I have no reason to arrest you. Didn't I invite you in? I knew that the Supreme General would come to find me, but I didn't expect you to come as well." Gabriel leaned forward with his hands on the table, saying, "The Supreme General has already come?" Amon had indeed come to find Drick 3 days ago, and the scene was almost the same as today. At that time, Drick was patrolling the city, and just as he was getting off his horse and entering the mansion, a beggar in ragged clothes suddenly appeared in the distance. The guards were about to chase him away when Drick suddenly heard a voice in his ear, "Drick, I have something to ask you." This voice was like a sudden clap of thunder. Drick was startled and hurriedly said to the guards, "This is an elder from afar, please come to the backyard." The newcomer was Amon. His hair was disheveled, his face was dirty, and his clothes were ragged, looking like a beggar. Without saying a word, he walked into Drick's mansion. Drick followed behind and respectfully welcomed him into the backyard. According to Drick's memories, Supreme General Amon was still conscious, but his eyes were red, and when he spoke, he was always staring at an unknown place, not knowing what he was thinking. Of course, Drick knew why Amon was looking for him, and he gave a detailed account of everything that happened in the Temple of Isis. Then Amon took something left behind by Maria and went somewhere. Gabriel asked, "Under the power of the Tiamat's wrath, what else could be left behind?" Drick replied, "I saw with my own eyes a figure rushing into the sky with a hiss of pain. No matter what kind of supreme mage he is, it is impossible for him to fly straight to an infinite height until he disappears. Who exactly it was, I can't say, but you can imagine. The Tiamat's wrath can't destroy everything. The Adoratress is gone, and the scepter is destroyed, but in the middle of the scorched earth, there is an elixir of the gods. At that time, after the storm with the power of destruction disappeared, people did not dare to approach the site of the Temple of Isis for a long time. It was Drick who entered with the warriors of the Legion to clean up the remains. The Supreme Warrior walked in alone first, and he found that the only relic in the scorched earth was the god's tear, lying quietly in the dust with tears shining. Gabriel asked again, "Why did you keep the parangan and not hand it over?" Drick lowered his head and replied, "I don't know why, but the luster of the god's tear really shone like a tear, so I quietly put it away. I also know that this parangan was personally opened by Supreme General Amon back then. Maybe one day he will return here, so I think the relic of the Adoratress should be given to him, not the Empire of Igut." Gabriel did not find Amon again, but he learned the latest news about Amon. He had come to Montefiore and taken the god's tear from Drick. Zaman had experienced many hardships, but he had never been depressed. His life was very simple, and he did not pursue luxury, but he had never abandoned himself. Now he was unkempt and dirty, and his clothes were ragged. It seemed that he had no mind to care about other things, not even the clothes he wore and the dust on his face. What kind of state of mind was this, that could make a 9th-level great achiever fall into such a state? According to Drick, Amon's mind was still clear, but he was always in a state of confusion. Fortunately, he now looked like a beggar, and it was not easy to attract attention in the crowd. Gabriel searched for Amon in the various cities of Igut. This was a mission given to her by Maria, and she had to complete it. Looking for Amon had even become her belief. The young man who walked out of the town of Duk had now become the altar of Ammonius, but he had given up everything he had and disappeared into the mortal world in ragged clothes. Half a year passed, and Gabriel still could not find him. With the passage of time, the unforgettable pain seemed to be less intense, and inadvertently became lasting and continuous. If Gabriel could not find Amon, she could not go back. Whenever she turned around on this road, she seemed to be able to see Maria's eyes, shining like the god's tear. The place where Gabriel finally stopped was the eastern bank of the Nile River, surrounded by a wilderness. In the distance, there were schools of slugs resting on the riverbank. A little further from the riverbank was a range of mountains, and there was a bend in the mountains. Walking into the col, there was a flat valley. This place was still fresh in Gabriel's memory. When Amon first came to Igut, the high priest of the temple of Isis, Julian, had sent people to hunt him down. There was a fierce battle in this valley. Amon eliminated all the pursuers, exhausted his strength and seriously injured. He walked out of the col to the riverbank and fainted on the ground. Maria and Gabriel happened to be passing by the Nile River in a boat. Alarmed by Schrodinger's cry, they went ashore to rescue Amon. This was an unexpected reunion, as if it was a pursuit arranged by fate. If Amon could not get rid of the heartache, sooner or later he would come to this place to remember Maria. Gabriel was waiting in this valley. After living in seclusion in the valley, Gabriel did not give up on cultivating the power of the origin. To find Amon and protect him, he must have great power. Amon was facing the Ennead, the archangel. Seth's injuries were definitely not light, and he would certainly not appear again in the short term, so Amon would not be able to find him. But Seth could command the many divine emissaries in the Ennead, and no matter how capable Amon was, it would be difficult to deal with him alone. Perhaps the conflict had already broken out, but Gabriel had been wandering around the Igut for so long and had not heard of any fierce fighting. The so-called cultivation was not just about power. Gabriel had to calm her soul and find the clear and firm faith that guided her. She had been thinking about what Maria said in the letter. Maria knew what kind of impact this would have on Gabriel's soul, so she specifically asked in the letter, at that time, what kind of guidance will your faith receive? She also reminded, I know your faith in the gods, that is the light of your heart. I hope you will find the true source of divinity and accept the guidance of that light. Maria did not want Gabriel to be lost because of this, and even tactfully told Gabriel to accept the guidance of Amon. The adoratress was well aware of the path of exploration that Amon was walking on. But now the one who was lost was Amon, and perhaps he was getting further and further away from the path to the gods. The people of Leng had lost Ammonius, and Amon had also lost Maria, and he must find her. And Gabriel wanted to find Amon, which was equivalent to finding the source of divinity that guided her in her faith. When the sun rose on this day, Gabriel sat in the valley and prayed quietly, listening to the voice from the soul that was getting clearer and clearer. Whose voice is it that rings in the soul, like the light of the sky, that is the call of the eternal source? Whose eyes did I see, full of compassion, with divine sorrow? God, the God that I call, who are you and where are you? To find you, to find my wish, my path, and my glory. Open your eyes and see, the sinful people of the world have created everything that makes them feel sinful. The man in the white robe promises blessings to the world, but under the white robe is the tale of sin. People of the temple, to whom are you offering? The statue of the God whose hands are stained with blood accepts the praise of the people. The true God will come and carry out a great and all-encompassing investigation. The golden grain will be left behind, and the chaff of the sinner will be burned. I will not forgive him. Under the huge shadow, I see the light of the angel flying, I see the mission that I struggle for, I see the source of divinity, I see the round ghost above my head." Gabriel, who was praying, suddenly raised her head. In the distance, there were several powerful auras rapidly approaching from the direction of the Nile River, accompanied by violent impacts and buzzing sounds of energy explosions. This was a fierce battle between the great achievers. Gabriel flew up into the air with the Blade of Order. She had long been an 8th-level Supreme Warrior, and now she had also verified the 8th-level achievement of the Power of Origin. As soon as Gabriel flew out of the valley, she saw a figure fall from the sky like a meteor, barely falling into the river and landing on the shore. The man's hair was disheveled and his body was covered in dust, and he smashed a large pit in the soft, wet soil of the riverbank, mud splashing everywhere as if he was unconscious. Although his face could not be seen clearly, the familiar figure was that of Ammon, whom Gabriel had been looking for a long time. In the distant sky, 2 people were flying over one after the other, and the one in front was the frog goddess Hecate of the Ennead divine clan. There were brownish-green stripes on her cheeks and forehead that reflected a strange floating luster. The frog goddess flew over and waved her sleeves in the air. Waves rolled up on the Nile River, and a transparent water arrow flew out from the waves, drawing a curved arc towards Ammon who had fallen to the ground. Huge waves also surged up from the river and rushed ashore, white foam rolling up the wall of waves like a huge monster hand stretching out from the river, carrying muddy water with it towards Ammon who had fallen on the riverbank. Just then, Gabriel arrived and slashed out with her axe. It was as if space had been cut open, separating the wall of waves rushing towards the shore from the waves in the river. The huge force caused the water to splash everywhere, and several huge slugs flew back into the river with their fangs and claws. This was a space-cutting magic, executed with the magical Blade of Order, and its power was indescribable. Although Gabriel had mastered the 8th level of the Power of Origin and could instantaneously cast high-level magic like a supreme mage, she had always been a warrior at heart, and she always had a habit of doing what she was best at. The slash in the air only used the power of space cutting to disperse the wall of waves that rolled towards Ammon, while Gabriel's figure did not stop, and like a bolt of lightning, she flew straight towards Hecate who was flying in the air. The battle axe erupted with a silver arc of light, covering Gabriel's figure within it, and dispersed the water arrow rolled up by Hecate with a crisp shattering sound. Gabriel's appearance was too sudden, and Hecate was almost caught off guard. She hurriedly turned around and clasped her hands together, and the scattered water arrows and the rising waves in the river quickly condensed into a thick ice wall in the air. With a cracking sound, the ice wall was split open by the silver light as soon as it appeared, and from the silver light, a majestic blonde woman wielding a half-moon-shaped battle axe chopped straight towards Hecate. As a divine emissary, Hecate rarely encountered this kind of battle. Gabriel was one with the axe as he charged straight towards her from the air, and did not even bother to take a stance or fight with her. He was completely focused on killing the enemy, and did not even bother to ask a single question. Hecate hurriedly opened her mouth and roared, and a surging sound wave spread out in front of her. With a huge impact, the ice wall that had been split apart instantly exploded, and the silver light that enveloped Gabriel was also shattered, but Gabriel was still able to chop down with her axe. Hecate's frog's roar could even shatter boulders, and even if a powerful warrior's body could withstand it, the impact on their soul would still cause them to lose consciousness. This was her best method of survival and attack. Although the arc of light formed by the fusion of Gabriel and his axe was shattered, the axe seemed to have cut a gap in the roar's impact. A green mist burst out with scattered brown streaks, and it was as if oil had been splashed in the air. Hecate screamed miserably as she tumbled towards the other side of the Nile River, and the green robe she was wearing was already in tatters. She had actually been cut down by Gabriel's axe, and was already injured. If it weren't for the rampage god Sobek rushing over from behind, Gabriel would have rushed over and killed her with another swing of his axe. Sobek's position was a little further back, and when Hecate flew to the center of the Nile River, he had just crossed the shore. Ammon had already landed on the ground and was unable to fight back, and seeing that he was about to be captured, the rampage god was overjoyed and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He slowed down a little, but he did not expect an accident to suddenly occur. A silver light flew up from the other side of the river, and from his point of view, he saw that Hecate was sent flying in an instant, and even Hecate's roar, which was her forte, was unable to stop the enemy. The rampage god bared his fangs and brandished his claws as he fell, and only then did the rampage god see Gabriel in the air. The blonde female warrior had already swung her axe at him, and an arc of light flew towards him with a thunderous roar. Chapter 222. A huge tail with bone spikes suddenly appeared out of thin air, silently slashing towards Gabriel's back, only letting out a whistling sound when it got close. Gabriel could no longer dodge, and she did not want to dodge at all. She spun on the spot, and the light emitted by the blade of order was incomparably sharp, sweeping the tip of the tail that almost hit the back of her head. Jean heard a cry of pain, and the incomparably hard giant tail was actually cut off a small part, spinning away. This axe was too sharp. The long tail suddenly retracted in pain and disappeared, while Gabriel let out a muffled grunt and flew forward, arriving in front of Sobek and swinging her axe. This was a contest between warriors, a head-on collision of energy and power, with no room for evasion. Sobek swung his long whip to parry the axe, and the two powerful weapons collided, like two mountains colliding in the air, the echoes echoing over the Nile River for a long time. The huge impact sent both of them flying backwards, landing on both sides of the Nile River. Sobek's expression was ugly, and after landing, he picked up the injured Hecate and turned to leave, flying close to the ground and soon disappearing. With Gabriel's power, she would not be at a disadvantage fighting either Hecate or Sobek alone with the Blade of Order, but she would definitely not be able to resist the two of them working together. But today's situation was a bit special. These two divine emissaries had chased them from the source of the Nile River, and Amon was exhausted as he fell from the clouds, while they were also at the end of their tether. Gabriel suddenly rushed out, and the two of them could not resist, so they immediately fled when they saw that the situation was not good. Gabriel landed on the bank of the river, and finally saw Amon clearly. Amon lay unconscious on the ground with his long hair hanging loosely over his shoulders. He stretched out a hand to try to grab something, but only grasped the muddy water on the ground. His clothes were tattered and dirty, and even his hair was stuck together. Gabriel glanced at the opposite shore and knew that the two divine emissaries had escaped. She did not dare to stay here for long. This was the territory of Igut's Ennead, and there might be more divine emissaries chasing after them. She immediately left with Amon. Why would Amon appear in this place and be chased by the Ennead Divine System's divine emissary? For the past 6 months, he had been wandering around the Igut. He had been muddle-headed and in a half-conscious state. He had been crazily searching for Maria, who was long gone. His heart had always been with him. When he gradually woke up, he wanted to find Seth again, but the last message left by Maria had already explained one thing. As long as the gods were not willing to see the mortals, it was impossible for the mortals to find him. Amon was unwilling to accept all this. His tough personality had now become a kind of stubbornness, and he actually went to the distant Eru. The location of Eru was very secretive, and if there was no one to lead the way, it would be impossible to find it at all. But Amon learned the secret of this divine palace from Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. Eru was not the real residence of the Ennead, and only Horus lived here all year round. Its territory was very large, and it was also a place where many divine emissaries usually trained. Eru was separated by a spatial magic formation, and no matter how capable Amon was alone, he could not attack it by force, but he knew where the portal was. He flew into the divine palace riding on Osiris' rib. The rib of the Osiris was a divine artifact in itself, and it carried the brand and aura of Osiris. When unfolded, it was like an invisible spatial ship. After achieving the 9th level, Amon could fly this ship, and so he opened the portal and entered Eru directly, not even attracting the attention of many divine emissaries. The most heavily guarded places were often the most lax places. It was impossible for outsiders to enter and exit Eru, and the divine emissaries usually trained in their respective palaces in addition to carrying out their tasks. So in such a vast world, if one did not deliberately search, no one would really notice that there was one extra person. Aman wandered like a ghost in that magical mountain range. He was looking for Seth, but Seth was not here. Although Batet had long since left, her palace was still there, in a deep valley. It had been abandoned, and there was no one around. Aman crashed into Bastet's palace, and only then did he fully regain his senses, realizing that he might have done the boldest thing in the world. How did he run into Eru? There were dozens of divine emissaries in this divine palace, and if he was discovered, Aman would be walking right into a trap. But Aman did not slip out quietly as he did when he came in, and he did not give up his original intention to find Seth for revenge. Whether the Ennead was here or not, 9 magnificent palaces were still preserved for them in the Valley of the Gods in the center of Eru. These 9 palaces were distributed in an arc according to the foot of the mountain. Horus was the 10th god of the Ennead who had transcended eternal life, and his palace was in the center of the 9 palaces, symbolizing the status of the Lord God. Since Horus lost his position as the Lord God and disappeared, the 10 palaces in the Valley of the Gods were empty, and only Seth occasionally came. But there were divine emissaries patrolling regularly, and the Ennead mirror, which watched all the subtle movements of the entire divine palace, was now placed in Seth's palace. Through this mirror, the divine emissaries could directly summon Seth, and Seth could also give his orders. Since Aman had entered Eru, he simply took the risk of sneaking into Seth's palace. He wanted to hide in this grand palace and wait for the opportunity to assassinate Seth. The Lord God was seriously injured and fled to the divine kingdom, and would never show up easily, but he was, after all, the Lord God of the Ennead, and one day he would return to this place. Who would have thought that Aman was waiting in his palace? This was the most favorable environment to assassinate him. But Seth did not come back for a long time, and even the divine emissaries in Eru did not know where the Lord God had gone. Aman did not deliberately hide when he entered Eru, but strangely he was not discovered, and when he wanted to hide, he was accidentally pulled out. Because the Empire of Igut was going to build the Temple of Seth on the site of the Temple of Isis in Montefiore, the divine emissaries came to the palace to report to Seth through the Ennead mirror, and while operating the mirror, they scanned the situation in Eru and were surprised to find that an outsider had sneaked in and was hiding in Seth's palace. Aman had poked a hornet's nest this time. At that time, 4 divine emissaries attacked him at the same time, and the fierce battle even destroyed Seth's palace, and the other divine emissaries who were training in Eru were also alarmed and rushed to the battlefield. Aman was not afraid of death, but he did not want to die here. He still had too many things to accomplish, and he fought his way out of Eru before the divine emissaries could surround him. 7 or 8 divine emissaries chased after him, and Aman fought and retreated, flying thousands of miles to the south. He had shaken off most of the pursuing divine emissaries, and only Heket and Sobek were still in hot pursuit. Aman broke out of the encirclement and fought fiercely all the way. After repelling the many divine emissaries, he was seriously injured, but he did not finally get rid of the pursuers. He was exhausted. With the last of his strength, he flew to the place in his memory on the banks of the Nile River. In fact, there was no need for Heket and Sobek to do anything anymore. Aman had fallen from the clouds on his own. He struggled and fell on the riverbank where he had been unconscious, and there was a burst of darkness in front of him, as if there were countless golden lights flashing in the void, and the specks of golden light turned into the shadow of Maria. Aman knew that his life was coming to an end, and no matter how much regret and unwillingness he had, he did not feel a trace of pain when he fell on the riverbank, only seeing a golden glow coming towards him. It felt so warm and blissful, as if he had returned to the most heartwarming scene in his life. When Aman was nearing the end of his life, he struggled and fell here, and he looked around and found himself at the starting point of reincarnation. He should have died here all those years ago, if nothing unexpected had happened. That time, he was still in a trance when he was rescued, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that Iko was becoming clearer and clearer. This young girl seemed to have walked out of a memory, with a mysterious and mature noble temperament. Aman was still looking straight into her eyes. Aman murmured, "Iko, is that you? You look so beautiful, just like I imagined. I finally see you. Am I already dead? How can I see you here? This is not the gloomy underworld, is this another home for souls? Where is this? What should I call it? If I give it a name, can it be heaven? When he fell here again, what he saw in his unconsciousness was a faint golden glow, and Maria appeared in front of him again. Almost without thinking, Aman looked at her and said the same words. Then he stood up and walked towards the golden glow, opened his arms and hugged Maria tightly in his arms, and lowered his head to kiss her lips. The two of them seemed to have melted into one in the golden light. And what people saw was Aman lying in the muddy water with disheveled hair, but he struggled to open his arms and hug the earth. After Gabriel defeated Hecate and Sobek, the unconscious Aman was hugging Echo in his soul. Aman had a long dream. In the dream, he might be crazy or obsessed, or he might be trying to make up for the regrets of his life. The content of the dream might be absurd or sweet, just like the dream he had when he broke through to the 7th level. Aman did the same thing as Bear, took away the adoratress of the temple of Isis, and was chased by the emissaries of the Ennead of Igut. His goal of escape was the same as Bear's, which was the huge cave in the belly of the Euphrates River Valley. But it had become the Garden of Eden, and he repelled the pursuit of the emissaries and brought Maria back to the Garden of Eden. Maria was no longer the adoratress of the temple of Isis, and the temple in the distant city of Montefiore had become the temple of Seth, and the mission of the adoratress of Isis had come to an end. Aman and Maria lived in the Garden of Eden for many, many years. Until one day, he was awakened by Gabriel. It was already a month later when Gabriel woke up Aman. She took Aman to a mountainous area in the west of Igut, where ravines were crisscrossed and many monsters roamed. The steep and deep cliffs were full of caves of all sizes, and almost no one could find them hiding here. This was the place where Gabriel had killed monsters many years ago, and it was very well hidden. She brought the unconscious Aman to heal. After passing the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle and obtaining the 9th level of the power of origin, he actually did not need to heal like ordinary people. His vitality seemed to be endless, and if there was no additional damage to his body, he only needed time to recover. As for other means or help, it would affect the speed and extent of recovery. Aman's injury was not serious, and he rushed out of the Ennead as fast as he could. The battles along the way were only to stop the pursuers, but the consumption was very great, and he was exhausted like a dry spring. On the other hand, if the soul fell into an eternal predicament, Aman might sleep forever until the end of that seemingly endless life. Gabriel cast various healing magic on Aman, but could not help him recover from the loss, and could only wait until Aman was no longer so weak before waking him up. When Aman woke up, he lay there with his eyes open, looking at the rock wall at the top of the cave, and looked at it silently for a day and a night. Gabriel sat at the entrance of the cave in the distance, also silent. A day later, Aman finally spoke, and it sounded like he was talking to himself. I seem to have had a dream, and after being woken up by you, I couldn't help but think about one thing. If I had been like Baal back then, maybe there wouldn't be today. Baal brought up the then Saintess Onion Kwan, and although that was the end, it should be something they were willing to bear. Gabriel said, with your achievements, you have already passed the various tests of the human world, and you shouldn't fall into such thoughts. The human world is a flowing river, and where you stand is the source. Don't look back and assume. Even if you go and assume, it's impossible. Lady Maria is not Trone, she has her protection, and it's impossible for you to take her away, and you can't force her will. Aman sighed and said, you are right, but those tests not only exist at the time of crossing, but also throughout. I finally understand now, why can the gods who have transcended eternal life also fall? Did you save me? Why did you appear in that place? What a coincidence. Gabriel, it can't be said to be a coincidence, it's almost certain. Remember before I challenged you to a duel, the Saintess gave us a letter. In the letter, she said that if one day you were sad and heartbroken, she hoped that I could protect you. I didn't understand at the time why you still needed my protection, only God knows. I couldn't find you, so I went to the place by the Nile River to wait for you, and if you were immersed in your memories, you would definitely go. Aman, She is no longer the saintess, the goddess Isis and the guardian saintess of Isis are both gone. For me, she is Maria, Eco and Maria. Gabriel was silent for a while, then asked, everything Maria let you see, until the moment when she unleashed the Tiamat's wrath, may be too cruel, but do you know why? Aman slowly replied, I know, she wanted to tell me a lot, including the witness she gave me at the end. But these are not the most important. The more important thing is that she knows me better than I know her. As long as this happened, I will ask around like crazy, I will go to all parts of Igut and ask all kinds of people, and I will not be satisfied until I get to the bottom of the situation. That is a great risk for me, so it is better for me to see it with my own eyes. Gabriel nodded. That should be the case. If you don't know what happened, you will turn Montefiore upside down. With your identity, if you lose your mind, it is no different from courting death. But even so, you almost died. What is going on with the two divine emissaries who were tracking you? Aman sat up and recounted his experience of breaking into Eru. Gabriel was dumbfounded when he heard this. This was not something that Supreme General Aman, who had always been calm, would do. Even a silly boy who had never seen the world would not be so stupid. To run into Eru to die, it was really great luck and ability that he was able to escape. Gabriel finally turned around and asked, you have also broken into Eru and almost lost your life, what are your plans next? Aman gritted his teeth and said, Seth will not show up easily, I made such a big commotion in Eru, even his palace was destroyed, and he was still able to hold back and not show up. It seems that his injuries are really not light, and whether he can recover to his peak is still a question. If I want to kill him, this is the best chance, I can't let him recover easily. Gabriel could not help but remind, you should also understand that if Seth is not willing to see you, you will not be able to find him. Aman raised his head, his eyes seeming to look through the rocks to the distant sky. I can find a way to force him to show up, and even if I can't force him to show up, at least let him fall from the altar. Gabriel also stood up. This is not your style. Even if you want to do this, you have to wait until you are strong enough. Doing something like breaking into Eru again is a meaningless death, and it is not something that Maria wants to see. Aman stood up. I know what to do, I will heal my injuries, restore my greatest strength, and then force Seth to show up, even if I have to make the Empire of Igut restless day and night, I will not let him have an easy time. Gabriel suddenly said very sadly, you seem to have changed. You are now in a very weak state, but looking at the aura that you exude when you say these words, it is extremely powerful. I believe that you will become stronger and stronger, but this is not the path you are pursuing, and the further you go, the further away you may be from your wishes. Aman suddenly said with some excitement, why can't I make mistakes? If this is wrong, then let me be wrong. One day I may have to return to that altar, or pursue the realm of true transcendence and eternal life. But at this time and place, I am not Ammonius, not the Supreme General, I am Aman. Roderick had built a defensive magic formation for his mansion and strengthened the guards and patrols, and his life had been very stable for the past 6 months. Although he was young, as a hereditary governor, he had been in the officialdom for a long time and had almost never made a mistake. He was very good at preparing for a rainy day, and was not stingy with his actions. Over the years, although he had not achieved the national admiration of Goliath or Aman, he had done a lot of practical things, and his position in the Cape States and the Empire of Igut was becoming more and more stable, and he was almost irreplaceable as a governor. Chapter 223 205, The gods whose altar has fallen. The plains of Duk was in a state of chaos, and Roderick was well aware that Sio and the others were transporting strategic supplies to the city of Salem through the border of Cape in the name of trade, and he turned a blind eye to it. Gabriel had asked him to inquire about Aman, and he was really concerned, but it was a pity that the well-informed governor had not received any news for more than half a year, and it was as if Aman had disappeared from the world. Roderick also went to the shrine to pray as usual, and every time there was a ceremony in the city, he would also lead the people to hold a sacrificial ceremony. But the most important prayer in his heart was only one thing, and that was that the war in the plains of Duk would not spread to the Igut, otherwise the first to bear the brunt of the war would be the Cape States. He also hoped that the city of Salem would be able to gain a foothold, that Aman would be safe, and he was willing to provide any help that he could in private. Rod Dick had been inquiring about Aman for so long to no avail, but he never expected that Aman would take the initiative to show up publicly in the Cape States. When he saw Aman, he was so surprised that he stepped on air and fell off the carriage, and when he turned around, not only did he order the entire city to arrest him, but he also wrote a letter of apology to the pharaohs of Igut. The shrines of the cities of the Empire of Igut held a sacrificial ceremony twice a month, and the people of the cities could come to the shrines at that time. There were also 3 grand ceremonies every year, which were equivalent to the most important festivals in the cities. That day happened to be the grand ceremony of sacrifice to the god Ra, and it was also the carnival of the citizens. On this day, the officials of the various departments were all on holiday, and the people wore new clothes and shopped in the streets and alleys, a rare day of leisure and enjoyment. After noon, everyone gathered in the square of the shrine to chat and laugh, and many small merchants and peddlers also came to the square with their loads and carts. The carriage of the governor of the city arrived, and Rod Dick lifted the curtain and was about to step down, while the supreme mage Ibn led the mages to line up on the long steps, and the atmosphere was cheerful and peaceful. The heavy door of the shrine was open at this time. From the front of the square, one could see the statue in the main shrine. No one thought that at that moment, a figure suddenly flew out of the crowd, shot straight into the main shrine like a startled swan, swung his sword with a golden arc towards the statue of Seth next to the statue of Ra, and then smashed a big hole in the solid stone roof of the main shrine. Tens of thousands of people exclaimed in unison, and then fell silent again. They all stared with their eyes wide open and mouths agape. Ibn, who was about to come over and greet Rod Dick, cried out in alarm. He waved his staff and rushed into the sky in pursuit. However, just as Ibn flew above the divine hall, another figure flew over from the side. The axe in his hand was like a silver blur as a curved blade cleaved at Ibn. Ibn was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. He turned around in the air and went into the big hole in the main temple's roof. He then applied a thick layer of air elemental armor. The second person who suddenly flew out swung his axe to force Ibn back, and then flew away. Then, everyone heard a very strange sound coming from the temple. Crack, crack, crack. After the time it took to finish a meal, there was another loud bang, as if something heavy had collapsed and fallen to the ground. The guards on duty had chased in the direction of the troublemakers' escape, and the priests rushed into the hall to see Ibn's situation. Rod Dick was just about to get out of the car when this happened. He looked up at the sky in astonishment, lost his footing, and fell over. The governor fell when he got out of the carriage, and the guards who were supposed to support him also turned their heads to look at the sky, but they didn't manage to hold him. Rod Dick couldn't care less about this. He got up and hurriedly ordered martial law throughout the city to arrest the assassins. Governor Dick called the 2 men assassins, but they didn't assassinate anyone. If they did assassinate someone, it would only be the statue of Seth. After the first assassin rushed into the temple and swung his sword, he didn't stop at all. He broke through the roof and left. When the priests rushed into the temple, they saw Lord Ibn standing on the ground looking at the statue of Seth with a shocked expression. A crack slowly appeared between the eyebrows of the tall and sturdy stone statue. Then, the crack spread and branched out more and more. There was a series of crackling sounds in the temple. Seth's statue was covered with cracks and gradually became like a spider's web. Then, it collapsed with a loud bang and shattered into pieces all over the ground. Rod Dick ordered the arrest of the assassin, but who was the assassin? No idea. What did he look like? No one could see clearly. How could they catch him? There was no way to find him. But Rod Dick had to make this gesture. The NRA Legion and the city's garrison were urgently dispatched. They searched for suspicious people day and night in all parts of the country. They caught a lot of robbers, and it was chaos. This matter was quite serious. During the city's sacrificial ceremony, important military and political figures were present. Under the watchful eyes of the public, the statue of the archangel was smashed with a sword. If it was pursued, everyone, including Rod, Dick and Ibn, would be guilty. Knowing that he couldn't catch the assassin, Rod Dick had to do his best to hunt them down. At the same time, he had written a letter of apology and was preparing to send a detailed report of the incident to the capital of Igut. Rod Dick couldn't say anything. In fact, he knew who the two men were. The first one to rush into the temple and swing his sword was Amon. Although no one saw his face, Rod Dick was familiar with his figure and momentum. He could recognize him at a glance. The second one who swung his axe in the air to repel Ibn was, of course, Gabriel. It seemed that the supreme warrior had found Amon and followed Amon to do such an absurd thing. Instead, it caused Rod Dick to suffer an undeserved disaster. After the confession was written, Rod Dick called his confidant and privately told him who he should greet in the capital and what kind of gifts he should give so that he could help him. He was unlucky in this matter. Pharaoh would definitely order a reprimand. A reprimand was fine as long as there was no substantial punishment. Before he finished speaking, he heard another piece of news, which made Rod Dick breathe a big sigh of relief. It turned out that just 3 days after the statue of Seth in the main temple of the Cape States was smashed by a sword, the same thing happened in the city of Danis, which was closest to the Cape States. There was no sacrificial ceremony in the city of Danis that day. Everything was very calm, but suddenly someone flew into the air and smashed a big hole in the roof of the main temple. After slashing the statue of Seth with a sword, he flew away through the big hole. No one could react. The priests watched the statue crack into pieces and collapse. When the mayor of Danis received the urgent report, he had just finished eating and was going downstairs. His legs went soft and he rolled down the stairs, breaking an arm. The personal guard standing beside him was severely punished, so how could he not support the city lord? The mayor of Danis was not as calm as Rod Dick. He was probably scared out of his wits. On the other hand, Rod Dick was relieved. Although he did not know why Amon and Gabriel did that, he understood what they were doing. They were not deliberately causing trouble for the Cape States and making him a scapegoat. There would definitely be a reprimand from Pharaoh, but there would not be any substantial punishment. Maybe there would be a few private words of comfort. Rod Dick quietly let his men go to the capital according to the original plan. There were also a lot of gifts and letters of apology. At the same time, he paid close attention to the movements of the other cities. Just as the shrewd mayor expected, 7 days later, the same thing happened in the city of Bushiri to the west of Danis. Another half a month later, an assassin broke into the main temple of the city of Bubas to the south of Danis and smashed the statue of Seth with a sword. In the next month or so, earth-shattering events happened one after another in the city of Atri, Rokai, and Heliopolis on the east bank of the Nile River. The content was the same, just that the time and location were different. A crazy assassin suddenly rushed into the main temple of the city, and without doing anything else, he slashed at the statue of Seth, then flew into the sky. When they were in the Cape States, Gabriel appeared with Amon, but later, when these cities were in trouble, Gabriel did not show up at all. This person must be crazy, a lunatic among lunatics. He did such a crazy thing that was beyond the imagination of the world. But he was so powerful that it was terrifying. People were talking about him as a crazy archmage, and he was at least a level 8 archmage. Because he could fly, and the power of the sword in his hand had a dazzling and shocking divine effect. As for what kind of divine spell it was, the ordinary people did not know. What kind of strange and terrifying existence was a great sorcerer who used a sword instead of a magic staff? The temple was such a dignified and noble place, but the man rushed in like he was seeking revenge. It was not like he was a desperado. This man did not hurt anyone, he just attacked the statue of Seth. There were countless statues of Seth, large and small, all over Igut, but this man was looking for the one in the main temple of each city. So far, In more than 2 months, the man had smashed the statue of Seth in the main temple of the 7 cities east of the Nile River in Igut. The impact and shock of this matter was so great that the whole empire of Igut was about to be turned upside down. Garrisons everywhere were dispatched to search, and the Magic Academy of Igut and the Imperial Department also sent a large number of masters to hunt him down. As for the other cities that the assassin had not yet visited, they were all on guard, guarding their main temples airtight. They must not let this blasphemous devil succeed again. Amon's title had now risen from assassin to blasphemous devil. His purpose was not to fight with the army, but to destroy a statue that could not be moved. He would leave with one blow without delay, and he might appear in another city at any time. The cities of Igut could not move the statue of Seth from the main temple, dig a hole and hide it, could they? In fact, when Amon destroyed the statues of Seth in the 4 cities, the nearby cities were already on guard, but he still succeeded. The small cities in the hinterland of Igut, which were not in strategic locations, could not have too many masters on guard. Even if a group of priests and warriors were sent to guard the door of the temple, they might not be able to stop Amon's sudden attack. The city of Heliopolis also specially gathered the mages to set up a magic formation in the temple, but the mages could not set up the formation day and night. After waiting for a month, there was no movement. When everyone relaxed, Amon suddenly smashed the door open and rushed into the temple one morning. Before the priests could activate the magic formation, Amon had already waved his sword and left. So far, no one had seen the madman's face. Although Rod-Dick knew, he did not tell anyone, so everyone did not know that the blasphemous devil was Amon. Later, all kinds of rumors spread like a plague in the empire of Igut, and some people even said that the man was not a devil, but a god who had a grudge against Seth. Of course, there were many masters in the empire of Igut, and the Academy of Igut also sent people to the cities to investigate the statues that had been smashed by the devil. Several elders of the Academy had seen the remains of the statue and listened to the detailed descriptions of the scene at the time. They all agreed that the man was at least an 8th-level Supreme Warrior, or even a 9th-level Supreme Warrior. A Supreme Warrior who could fly freely was shocking. In the traditional view, this was the divine power that only gods or messengers of the gods had. A powerful warrior could also rush into the temple and smash the statue like the devil, or break through the roof and escape, but it was impossible to fly straight into the sky and disappear without a trace. The messengers of the gods were usually called gods on earth, such as the cat goddess Batet, the frog goddess Heket, the crocodile god Sobek, and others. There were a total of 10 gods in the Ennead divine clan, including Horus, and the rest of the gods were regarded as messengers of the gods. Nowadays, the empire of Igut believed in Allah as the only god, so the rest of the gods and messengers were called angels, and Seth was the leader of the angels. If they were facing such an angel, then the situation would be even more serious. Some supreme mages whispered that this might be the revenge of the former king of the empire, Horus. One of the elders of the Academy of Igut, the high priest of the former temple of Isis and now the temple of Seth, Bork, after inspecting the 2 destroyed statues, secretly reported to the pharaoh Merneptah that the method of destroying the statues was similar to the mining techniques of Duk, so he guessed that the man was probably Amon. What Bork said was right, and his guess was well-founded. Because after Supreme General Amon left Igut, he was worshipped as Ammonius in the city of Salem on the plains of Duk, and perhaps he really did possess the means of the gods. Could it be that Amon was really a god who had come to Earth, or was he an emissary sent to Earth by a certain divine clan? Otherwise, how could a miner from a small town of Duk miraculously achieve such feats that shook the continent? Those who saw Bork's secret report could not help but think so, but no one could say it publicly. Although Amon had been away from Igut for a year, the reputation of the Supreme General of the Empire had not diminished, and he was worshipped and revered by many people, and poems praising him were still sung everywhere. The pharaohs of Igut sending people to hunt down and kill Amon was a secret order that was not made public, and on the surface, General Amon did not violate any of the laws of Igut. As for the killing of Prince Snek, it was later left unsettled, and no one in the court was willing to mention his name, but Amon's influence among the people was growing. As a matter of fact, Aman only went to the territory of the plains of Duk, which was also his hometown, and it was publicly awarded to Aman by the late pharaoh Lazith II. So the Supreme General's behavior was not a defection, but rather a return to his hometown to build the city-state of his dreams with the reward of the late pharaoh Lazith II. On his way back to his hometown, Aman also defeated the supreme mage Celia of Hittite and the beautiful invincible princess, thereby gaining the support of the Hittite Empire for him to build a city-state. This was how the story of Aman was told among the people, and it was also a fact that not only did Aman's reputation not diminish in the minds of the people of Igut, his legend instead made more people yearn for and revere him, and his influence had even surpassed that of any famous hero in history. Aman was worshipped as a god in the city of Salem, and after many people heard about it, they worshipped him even more from the bottom of their hearts. If a god really descended to the human world and experienced everything as a mortal, then he should be like Aman. This was the god that people dreamed of. Why did Aman have such a great influence? Many people probably did not expect it, but when you think about it, it makes sense. In this hierarchical society, Aman's experiences broke through too many shackles and obstacles, and he was the dream of the vast majority of ordinary people. He was born as the son of a lowly miner in the town of Duk. When he was a teenager, his home was destroyed and he wandered around, but he made great contributions that shook the continent, and then built a miraculous city-state in his hometown, and was eventually worshipped as a god. His story was more inspiring than the deeds of any high and mighty emperor. Many people worshipped Aman, to put it bluntly, out of a mentality of self-replacement and compensation. The vast majority of people in the world could not have a noble birth, but Aman was once like them. Even if they could not do what they could not do, they could still dream about it, and the achievements that Aman achieved seemed to be like their own achievements in their dreams. Even if Merneptah, Pharaoh, and a few of the empire's higher-ups, even if they agreed with Bork's speculation, it would not be good to say it publicly. If the empire of Igut really caught the blasphemous demon and found out that he was Aman, it would not be announced that he was Aman, but would instead give him another name or a demon title. But it was not easy to catch the demon. Even if he was not an angel, a 9th-level supreme warrior who appeared and disappeared mysteriously, and it took him more than 2 months just to destroy 7 statues. If they could not find his exact whereabouts, they could not even talk about mobilizing masters to pursue him. After the 7 city-states were attacked one after another, the erratic whereabouts of the demon finally became clear, and the 7 city-states east of the Nile River in Igut were all in trouble. Judging from the route he had taken, he should have entered the territory of Igut from the Cape States, and from east to west and then south. The next step should be to cross the Nile River and reach the city of Montefiore. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.